hand on top of the left hand. Your eyes are closed, your chin pulled back a little bit, your spine is straight, shoulders dropped down. Connect with the earth, with the floor. And let's breathe. A long, long, deep breath. Slowly deep inhale and slowly exhale. Feel your heart center, feel your heartbeat. We are going to connect with our Divine Mother, with the Shakti energy, the primal first power, the feminine side of God. Keep breathing. Feel connection with the earth. Imagine the road coming down to the earth, to the center of the earth. And feel connection with the sky by your crown chakra, by the top of your head. And expand your heart center. Long, deep inhale. Long exhale. Keep breathing. And the lyric is Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serab Shakti, Serab Shakti, Serab Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata Shakti, Namo Namo. I bow to the primal power. I bow to the all-encompassing power and energy. I bow to that for which God creates. I bow to the creative power of the Kundalini, the divine mother power. This powerful mantra belongs to all women to call upon anytime. We can chant it freely and powerfully at will anytime to connect with ourselves, to connect with our divine mother. So I can start to sing. Your eyes will be closed, and keep your hands on your heart center. We will sing it for 11 minutes. In Kundalini Yoga, we sing it for 11, 22, or 31 minutes. So quite long, but you can be in a meditative state. So keep singing. Concentrate on your vibration, the sound which you produce. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serab Shakti, Serab Shakti, Serab Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Namo Namo Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo. Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Pritum Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti Namo 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 Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Adi Shakti, Namo Namo. Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Serava Shakti, Namo Namo. Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Pritam Bhagavati, Namo Namo. Kundalini Mata Shakti, Mata Shakti, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo Namo, Namo. Inhale. Hold your breath for a moment. Feel the connection with the Divine Mother, with yourself. And exhale. Please keep your eyes closed. Just breathe. When you're ready, you can open your eyes.
We just participated in a beautiful mantra invoking the mother. And this is Yana Fortep. She is a singer, songwriter, Kundalini yoga teacher, short filmmaker, and she's completely dedicated to women and serving women by doing Kundalini with them and mantra. And she helps empower women all around the world. So you can see her on YouTube and online. So thank you so much, Yana.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So beautiful.
Have a good day. Good night.
And I'll keep you here if you want to hang out. You're welcome to do that. So welcome to part 2 of Menstrual Awareness Day. I don't know what the weather is like around you, but it is raining heavily, and maybe that's affecting our video, but I am wanting to connect to all of you, and you know, maybe all the desired connection is creating this energy overload around me. We had a lovely morning, and I'm really excited about what we have planned for you for this evening. So what I'd like to do is just show you a short video before we get started with our panel. I'll just wait for all the panelists to arrive. So this is a lovely video that I prepared with Clara, and she is in Sweden, and she works with an organization called Mensen. And what they do is they help companies become certified.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited. So my name is Clara, and I live in Gothenburg, the second biggest city in Sweden. And I'm the project manager at Mensen. It's a non-profit organization working with menstrual issues from different perspectives and towards different target groups. And I'm managing a project which we call Period Works in English, where we are working towards the working life and employers and employees on how to deal with menstruation in different ways. It actually began here with our project. We began with developing what we call the menstrual certificate last year, and I guess from that we also learned like it's a very new topic, even though people have been discussing it, individual and women, of course, and people in workplaces. But we heard about these stories, not having access to pads or tampons, or not being able to be absent from work because of cramps or PMS or whatever. So we decided to do something about it, and we started to develop this menstrual certificate, which is basically educational material and process management towards employers on how to be more aware and adapt the working conditions more to menstrual needs. And then this year we are like broadening the concept to also targeting labor unions and people, I'm not sure about the English term, but people working with union issues at a local level as well.
So this is a certificate that you issue to different workplaces. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so far we only worked with 2 workplaces as pilots to develop the materials. Yeah.
And what do you call this certificate?
In English, we actually discussed this yesterday. So far we only call it a menstrual certificate because it's very broad. But I'm not sure, it might, we have a few months left on the project, so it might change. This fall we plan to launch it on a broader. Before talking to you, like, I think it's 2 sides on it. It's both the individual women and people who menstruate, but it's also employers and people who work with the health and safety issues at the workplace. So I think it could come from both ways, both like if you are a menstruator, you could start to reflect upon it, like how am I affected about norms or taboos in the workplace? I know for myself, I started to think about these issues when I realized I never called in sick because of PMS, which was really the cause, but I called in and said, oh, I have a headache today, I can't come to work, or, you know, I didn't dare to use the word PMS talking to my manager. So I think those kind of issues you could reflect upon on a more individual level. But then I think it's very much up to the employer as well to realize that menstruation is also part of this health and safety issues at work. So I guess it could come both like from the up and from below.
Yeah.
Manson is also working with a project which we call Period Megaphone, where we go out in schools to teach about this topic. And I'm not working with this, but my colleagues are. And even though like sex education is obligatory in Swedish schools and they are supposed to teach about menstruation, like my colleagues notice that of course people don't really have the knowledge they should have about menstruation. So I think like formally and on a theoretical level, people learn about it in school. But I guess in reality, it depends very much on the teacher and the school and those things. So I don't know really where people learn about menstruation. I guess that's why we are needed. And on social media, you can see like even women of older age or people that you know are on Instagram. It's very obvious that they haven't learned in school, or that they reach out for the information themselves when they are adults. Different now for kids or people when they get their first period, but in my family we didn't talk about it at all before I got my period. So I guess that's of course also an issue. And also this thing that you might talk to your mom about menstruation, but it could be more difficult with your dad because he don't have the experience himself, and it can be very difficult for men who doesn't menstruate to talk about it, of course. So that's also like a sign that the knowledge is needed everywhere, not only for women, but also for men and trans people and other.
Are you having?
And that was super interesting because there it became very like clear to us that men want to learn, or people who don't menstruate want to learn more, but they don't know where to learn, or they are not provided information. So I think it's super important to let men join the conversation as well. It's vital, I think, for the change, language or whatever. And I think we also need to be forgiving and not, you know, it takes a long time to change the language or the approach or whatever, but I think it's important that everyone tries, of course, do their best. Parts, we both have this process management where we have meetings with the workplace, and if they have like any routines or other regulations on the issues of the health and safety and the work environment, and like try to see how menstruation can be integrated into that. But then I would say the biggest part is the education and the training session. So in June, we will have the training with the Body Shop, which is our current pilot workplace. And then we will focus both on like menstruation, the physiological parts of menstruation, the sociocultural parts, but then also dig deeper into the workplace and equality in the workplace, and yeah, how to work with work environmental issues in the workplace.
And what is your role
working there? And also a different kind of workplace, you know, if you're working with an office or the Body Shop, who also has these stores. And so I would say I learn as much in like empowering way to learn about your body and the body literacy and all of that. So
just like, and then
yeah, I think what's interesting to me with this work we are doing, it's like we start with menstruation and we focus on menstruation, but I think and I hope that it could also open up for a greater like acceptance and respect towards different bodily needs. You know, it's closely related to the mental health issues, or I don't know, people having allergies or whatever within working life, and the need for a more caring labor market and workplaces, you know, that actually look at the individuals, and a more flexible working place maybe. So I think and I hope that it will be like part of that change as well, not only the menstrual movement but also broader perspective. And I think to connect to what we talked about earlier, that's also like a way to talk about menstruation or start a conversation at work, I guess, for an individual to compare it to other kind of issues. At our previous pilot workplace, it was a man who talked about his dog being sick, and he was like in sorrow and he didn't sleep well, and that of course affected his work. And I think that could be an easy way to make it more understandable, because of course, if you don't have the experience of menstruation, it's difficult to understand and to know how to deal with it. But you could compare it to these more general issues to make it more understandable and more easy to grasp, I guess.
I hope you enjoyed, Clara. Such an interesting idea to go into places of work and treat this as, or allow people to have a conversation about menstruation as a basic health need and something that needs to be approached within the workplace. So now we are moving into our panel, and I just wanted to start by encouraging our audience to tonight to keep an open mind to the different ideas that are shared. And this is a place of you know, learning and openness and care and attention and support. So if anyone has any questions with, issues, things that come up, please drop a message to me in the chat box, and I will unmute you and allow you to speak. So don't feel that that you're not able to speak with us. And I want everyone to feel comfortable to speak. All right, so we have our illustrious panel here. Dr. Selassie is a naturopath, and she is in she's in Brooklyn, and she treats a variety of ailments, and she'll talk more about what she's up to. And then we have Dr. Shawn, and he's in Toronto, Canada, and he does a lot of work with cannabis and has experience advising different organizations and teaching. And then we have Fiachra, who's in Hong Kong. So we've got our truly global 4 panels here. And he is working with Felix & Co. and Altum. And my first question for you all is to explain to us where the inspiration came for your involvement with this plant. Some as CBD, some as THC, and others a combo. So let's start with Fiachra, please.
Thanks, Dr. Catherine. Firstly, it's an honor to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this event. It's truly amazing, and I really enjoyed tuning in this morning, New York time, and obviously last night Hong Kong time, with my girlfriend who found it an incredibly interesting and enlightening few hours. So, as you mentioned, we're working in Hong Kong to try and bring kind of CBD and cannabinoids and their benefits back to a region, where they were once, where they came from, where they originated from. And my personal inspiration for working with the plant is just based on 10 years of anecdotal experience of its benefits for me in my life. I don't have Dr. Selassie or Dr. Mieroski's kind of formal qualifications in this space, but truly one that's driven anecdotally by myself, and then the kind of experiences of others, as I've seen directly in their lives. So, and since we started, helping people in Hong Kong access CBD, the anecdotal reports have been truly incredible to hear from, particularly local Chinese who've never really had the education, say, that North Americans have had about cannabis.
Great. And Dr. Shawn, how did you get involved?
Well, I got involved mainly through my patients. So probably about 4 years ago, I started seeing a dramatic shift I treat a lot of pain, and a lot of patients were turning to cannabis either as a complete switch from their conventional pharmaceutical medications for pain, or using it in conjunction. And we're getting really good results with it. And so that's what led me to kind of investigate it further. And the whole idea of patients getting really positive outcomes, and getting positive outcomes fast with cannabis, CBD, THC, or whole extracts was really what sort of spurred my interest into it.
Cool. And Dr. Selassie?
My experience with the cannabis plant really comes out of, I would say, mostly my culture. I'm Rastafarian, and for those of you who don't really know what Rastafarian is, it's basically a Judaic-Christian, faith. We don't like to call it a religion, we call it a way of life. A famous Rastafarian that you might all know, who's known globally, is Bob Marley. So we really look at this plant as a sacred plant. It's really a meditation plant. And then we celebrate, things natural. We celebrate plants in general. And then fast forward, I ended up going to naturopathic medical school and really just fell in love with all plants, but really also in getting this perspective on all plants, realizing how special this one in particular is. And, and it can be used in so many ways, but as it pertains to me now, it's really clinically in my clinic with my patients. And I mostly use it with children that are dealing with epilepsy, and then also older adults who are dealing with pain. So that's really, and specifically CBD. I'm in New York, and CBD is readily available here. And it's, in a way, the form that I think most people feel most comfortable with, because it's not a psychoactive form.
And Dr. Shawn, so Dr. Selassie mentioned a few of the ailments that she uses with the CBD, and what have you been using it for specifically?
I would say the top 3 to 5 conditions that I use it for, or my patients are using it for, would be pain, spasticity, for mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, panic attacks would be another big one that falls under that umbrella, and sleep. Sleep is a big one as well.
So Dr. Selassie mentioned that CBD is a more palatable way of patients approaching this medicine, this plant. How does it affect, let's ask Fiachra, how does processing the plant affect the components of the plant?
Just to clarify, Dr. Catherine, in which sense?
I mean, as far as components, like we were talking about processing the plant from green until into an oil, and different things that get lost in the way or are added in the way.
Yeah, so I mean, look, the cannabis plant, or the hemp plant in its natural form, contains a broad range, or we would say a spectrum of cannabinoids, and CBD is a cannabinoid. THC is a cannabinoid, and there are 10s and 20s and 30 other cannabinoids, and we're discovering new cannabinoids every day, it seems, in a research sense. Each of the cannabinoids serve different functions and have different benefits for the body. So in its kind of original form, in its plant form, it has a spectrum of cannabinoids, but it also has a range of kind of essential oil type compounds called terpenes, and flavonoids, and a few other things. And so I suppose as is the way with nature, in its original format, it tends to be its most effective. And, it's evolved that way over millions of years. And obviously then as humans, we think we know best, and we can reach into the plant and we can extract one part of it and we can pull it out, and that will have the same benefits as it does in its original form. So I think that's, what's interesting for people in North America, where it's most accessible, is maybe to consume what we would call a full spectrum extract from the hemp plant. And a full spectrum extract, contains a lot of CBD, but it also contains a little bit of THC and a little bit of the other cannabinoids like CBG and CBN, etc. And generally speaking, this is the most effective type of CBD to take. But you can go from a full spectrum extract, and you can extract the THC, you can take out the THC, and then you would have what would be called a broad spectrum extract. And then if you take all the other cannabinoids except CBD out, you'd be left with a CBD isolate, which is a very pure white powder. And generally, when we extract from the cannabis plant, you have a very thick golden oil, and then that golden oil can be refined all the way down to a pure white powder, which would just be the CBD powder that remains. Unfortunately, you lose a lot of the benefits and the natural kind of synergistic effects of the plant the further you refine it. But it gets more legal, generally speaking, as you go around the world, and that's one of the benefits to doing that.
Yeah. And Dr. Shawn, you have some experience as well with using different types of plant or different strains. You've experimented yourself, and just talk to us a little bit, and also talk to us about what the laws are like in Toronto at this point in Canada.
Sure. So, well, I agree with Fiachra that I usually see the best effects with sort of a full spectrum or broad spectrum type of medication. So whether that's actually consuming the dry herb or inhaling dry herb, or some sort of oil that has been extracted with all the cannabinoids involved. And we see this in a lot of studies too, that get the best effects with sort of like a even ratio between THC and CBD, rather than just an isolate of one or the other. And then to the second part of the question, so cannabis here in Toronto. So we basically have two streams of cannabis here, or market of cannabis, and that would be the medical stream and then the recreational stream. So for the medical stream, there's some benefits to going that route. Namely, you have an allowance for a greater amount of cannabis per month, and you're allowed to grow more plants as well. And then you're also getting your product directly from the producer, so it tends to be a little bit cheaper. And then, but the process is a little bit longer. So on average, I find that it takes about 3 weeks from a patient making an appointment with a cannabis licensing clinic to getting their product, because they have to be assessed. They have some paperwork has to go through to set them up with their licensed producer. So it takes a little bit of time. And then the recreational market, which sort of opened up last year, or sorry, 2 years ago now. That is a little bit different. There's a few ways to get product that way. We have licensed dispensaries now, and we also are able to buy it online through what's called, here in Ontario, it's called the Ontario Cannabis Store. And so the government is sort of a middleman that controls the product. So it goes from the producer to the government and then to the consumer. The good things about recreational market is that you're able to pick and choose from a wide variety of producers rather than being stuck with like one or two with the medical stream. But you do pay a little bit more because now it's not wholesale. And when it first started, when recreational market first started, I think the thought was that people were more interested in high THC products. So there was very little CBD weighted products on the recreational market, but now we're seeing that there's really a huge response or interest from the population in CBD. So we're seeing a lot more CBD products come onto the recreational market as well.
And Dr. Selassie, if you could speak to the mode that you're using, the product that you're using, and perhaps share some anecdotal experience with issues around menstruation and using CBD.
Sure. In New York, recreational it's still not legal to have recreational cannabis around, and as far as we call it here, medical marijuana, you have to get a card from your medical doctor who is licensed to give those cards, and then you have to go to a specific dispensary. So as far as how I use this plant is really just CBD, mostly in tincture form, in an oil extract. Just because in my practice, I give out tinctures regularly. I do dispense supplements that it seems like the easiest form that people could sort of swallow. I mean, literally swallow, and also figuratively swallow, because I think a lot of people still feel uneasy with the idea that it comes from this cannabis plant. I mean, you know, to be in all fairness, it's really supposed to be all CBD from hemp plants, but from what I know in my experience, that sometimes you're just getting high CBD strains of the regular cannabis plant. And so most of it is just simply using, dropper bottles with my patients, sending them home with a dropper bottle and a dosing schedule. Dosing can be tricky and easy at the same time. Sometimes I just say, well, go for it. Go for like 2 full, dropperfuls and see how you feel. Other people are more, show a little more trepidation and they want to start with drops. And sometimes, and I'll have a wide range. Like I have one woman where she takes 2 to 4 drops of a 1,500 milligram extract, and she gets a lot of, on a 1,500 milligram extract, let's see, that's like just a few milligrams. It's just like, 12 or something milligrams. And other people need much more, like, maybe 100 or 200 even, depending on their pain. I like the idea of CBD for menstruation because it addresses, as Dr. Shawn said earlier, it addresses both pain, so a woman's going to experience menstrual pain, and then it also addresses anxiety and depression. And sometimes women get this around their menstruation, before their menstruation. I do have some patients with panic attacks that seem to be worse around menstruation. So, I can't say that I've got multiple clinical stories of using it, but I can definitely see the application, and I know that it has definitely helped my patients who have just any kind, there's so much research actually on CBD and pain and specific types of pain, but I really find that most people, they come in and they're experiencing pain, whether it's a dull pain, a sharp pain, a spastic pain, and it seems to really be helping with any of those things and from multiple causes, even though we might say it's really strong in the area of like neuropathic pain or something like that. So I feel like it's a really safe and effective way for anybody who's really dealing with pain from any kind of situation, but definitely for menstruation, I think it's safe to give to young ones. Like I am the mother of 5 daughters, and I feel very comfortable giving all of them CBD, and I have. So, I would say go for it. Go for it. And especially if you have, if there's a mental, if there's an anxiety component, I think it can be doubly effective for you.
Mm-hmm. So, Fiachra, what's it like in Hong Kong? Now, I guess the evolution is kind of, or the devolution is Toronto, New York, and now Hong Kong. So how are people responding, and do you see some of the stigma lifting? I mean, we're still dealing with stigma in North America, and it's legal, somewhat legalized. So what's it like in Hong Kong at this point?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and actually it's refreshing to hear Dr. Selassie refer to an element of stigma that remains in the US. I think, from my vantage point here in Asia, it's often easy to just think that, the US has completely destigmatized cannabis, and it's obviously not the case. And, you see the battle over full national legalization is far from over. So that's kind of, in a way, it's comforting to hear Dr. Selassie. Obviously, I'd prefer if there was no stigma remaining for you there. But in Hong Kong specifically, I think, and I've mentioned this to you previously, Doctor, about what's one of the most interesting challenges we face is the lexicon, or the kind of language that's used to talk about cannabis and its compounds in Chinese. And so the words in Chinese for kind of hemp and CBD and cannabis, it's all conflated into effectively one character, which just is MA or Ma. And so we try and talk about CBD, but we're lacking really a vocabulary at the moment, which doesn't have a kind of a historical stigmatization. So for example, in North America, we've moved on from the marijuana word, and the marijuana word was very much, you know, a word of the drug war. It was tainted, and it was a top-down tainting of that word from the US government. So we're still looking for vocabulary to try and talk about CBD in a way that doesn't evoke kind of historical memories of the war on drugs. That said, at the moment, I'm just about to open a CBD shop in Hong Kong, and it will be disguised as a cafe, because we know it's probably too soon for a shop to just be an overtly like cannabis or hemp related shop in Hong Kong, but it's going to be in Shenzhen for anyone who's on the call from Hong Kong. But I'm in there at the moment every day, and I'm getting people knocking on the door and opening the door and asking me what I'm doing or what's coming next. And it's really interesting, because until now I haven't had a chance to have multiple regular conversations about CBD with the local population, and actually surprised by the number of people. I mean, all of the Westerners, all of the expats, all of the foreigners immediately just, you know, their eyes light up and they're like, oh, that's very exciting. We'll be back when you open. And then about half of the Chinese, there's recognition of what I'm talking about. And about half of the Chinese, the local Hong Kongers, don't know what I'm talking about. So we have a big education, you know, challenge ahead of us.
I still have more questions for you, but I asked our audience. So I'm going to invite Donna. Will you go on video as well, or just I'll invite you to video if you want. So Donna has a question. Oh.
Hi, hello. Okay, so my question is more so, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and I had, in 2016, they found 2 masses, one on my ovary and one right above my ovary. So they ended up having to remove one of my ovaries because the tumor was infected. And but as a result, like since I was younger, actually, I've had really painful menstrual cycles, like really painful to the point where like I really can't do anything. I can't concentrate. And I started taking some vitamins that help, but they're really expensive. So I don't necessarily have them all the time. So I'm wondering, besides the pain management, in terms of CBD being effective, how would I find out like how much dosage I would have to take? And is there any other, I guess, is there any other effect that health benefit wise that it may have for someone like me who maybe has endometriosis or has fibroids, etc.?
Dr. Selassie?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Donna. I really appreciate it. I think that CBD is definitely indicated for you. CBD you'll find is probably up there with the price of maybe some of what you mentioned, your more expensive supplements, but I still want to encourage you to use it. Like, I think that maybe if you're, menstruating and you're feeling pain in the moment, you might need a higher dose. But what's amazing about CBD is you have receptors in your body that, accept CBD and want CBD. And one of the jobs of this amazing system of receptors is that it helps put you back in balance. So I think that if you have been experiencing period pain from when you were a young girl, that maybe your balance or it's sort of hard to explain, but you are, because you've had such a issue with this, you're probably really far right or far left. And if you even use it sparingly and take it small doses on a daily basis, and you over time, nourish those receptors, I think that in general, some of your ailments centered around endometriosis and your menses in general can come back into a better, more balanced state where you might, it might be more stable for you and more less, less intense pain over time. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And also, can you leave your information in the chat too? Because I'm in Brooklyn also.
Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I could add a little bit to that.
Yeah.
So one of the only studies I was able to find in terms of menstrual pain, period pain, specifically with CBD, had to do specifically with endometriosis. So there, in 2019, there was sort of a survey done, and they had responses for, it was just under 500 women, all with diagnosed endometriosis. And they were basically asking what were their top or most effective self-management techniques. And CBD oil was in the top, I think, 3. So along with heat and there was like yoga and things like that. So CBD oil was right up there. So, it's sort of a survey study, and there was no mention about dosage or anything like that. But out of those 500 women, and out of probably about a dozen different self-management options, CBD oil was one of the top. And so there's some really interesting things around the menstrual cycle in general in relation to cannabis. So we know a few things. One interesting thing is that during the luteal phase, so the second phase of the menstrual cycle, the body upregulates CB1 receptors. And it seems like endocannabinoids, or the cannabinoids that we produce, help modulate progesterone in that part of the menstrual cycle. And then on the flip side, in the follicular phase, women are more sensitive to THC, and that goes for a lot of other drugs too. So there are some interesting studies surrounding the menstrual cycle in general, but specifically for endometriosis, there is like a pretty recent survey, and CBD oil was a big part of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much for sharing, Donna.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have another question, and this is, oh, sorry, Fiachra, yeah?
Sorry, obviously, sorry, Catherine, I might just add a little bit, and thanks, Donna, for your question. I'm absolutely not going to offer health advice after the 2 doctors have weighed in, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about cost, because I think that's definitely front of mind with CBD. It's extremely, it is extremely expensive still, relative to hopefully where we can get it to in terms of cost and accessibility. So just 2 pieces of advice on maybe navigating the cost of acquiring CBD. One is that after somebody's experimented with it and understood their dose, their optimal dose. So Donna, you could buy a bottle locally wherever you are and try and understand, maybe with the help of an expert like Dr. Selassie or Dr. Mierowski, what your optimal dose is to actually then go and explore like a national brand. And one of the nice things about USA is that you can buy CBD legally and have it shipped from any of the 50 states to wherever you are. And so there are some really amazing brands online. So it's not something that has to be bought in a local store, because often you'll pay quite a bit of extra on top of the true cost. And for example, we sell an 1800 milligram bottle and a 300 milligram bottle, and I think they look the exact same size to a new consumer, but when you actually break down the cost per milligram of CBD, the 1800 milligram is almost twice as cheap. And so I would encourage everyone to just break down the cost of any CBD product into how many US dollars am I paying for this, divided by the number of milligrams in the product, and then obviously try and verify via some reviews that it's high quality. And that's one of the best ways to access it in a way that keeps the cost relatively lower.
That actually leads into this next question, which is from Christina. And she has a question about, oops, I hit the wrong, wrong more. She has a question about figuring out which products to buy. So go ahead, Christina.
Hi. Yeah, I was looking into different CBD tinctures like a few months ago. I never settled on one, but it was addressing kind of fibroid issues that there isn't kind of conclusive research yet, but that it could possibly help. So I guess I was curious if you all recommend certain like CBD tinctures, or like which ones, like what brands you guys do like. I agree the prices do seem to range a lot, so I appreciate that he brought that up. And actually before that, I'm going to back up. I asked one question also for Dr. Shawn. You had mentioned
that's what most people call me.
Yeah, you just said, I was like, I don't know how to say the last name, Mierowski. Thanks. I was wondering about, you said that we're more, THC is more sensitive during the follicular phase, but when you say sensitive, do you mean like in a positive way, or I didn't understand what does sensitive mean?
Yeah, so basically you'll have more of an effect from it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so you'll need a lower dose, I guess, to get the desired effect.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. And then I guess, to go back to just the other statement or question for anybody that has thoughts on brands or something.
Everyone has their opinion.
Yeah, we probably all have a little bit of input.
But as a rule, what are we looking for on the bottle to know that this is generally a good product? I mean, Fiachra has a lot of knowledge of manufacturing, but then Shawn has experience with, different strains, and Dr. Selassie actually has a product that she represents and really believes in. So yeah, everyone we'll start with Fiachra, or.
Yeah, and I'll thanks, Catherine, and I'll try and leave a bit of room for the two doctors to weigh in. But I've spent a lot of time in hemp and CBD manufacturing facilities in the USA. Obviously, we spent almost a year trying to find the right providers for our products in Asia. As a rule, one of the things I would suggest first doing when you encounter a brand that you'd like to buy is to look for a certificate of analysis on their website. Most of the big reputable brands will have a page dedicated to certificates of analysis. And if they don't, you can reach out to them directly and ask them to send you an example, what we would say COA for the product in question. If they won't provide you that COA, that's a massive red flag. And I would just walk away from that product, because there are many, many good alternatives. The other two things I would say is that I think GMP, which stands for Good Manufacturing Practice, if you're worried about quality of manufacturing, GMP is a certification which is hard to obtain and generally signifies a brand that is being produced to a very high standard. And then finally, I would recommend going with full spectrum, CBD. And I'll let the two doctors jump in with some thoughts, especially coming from the US market, North American market over there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Fiachra said. You have to look at the certificate of analysis, and on this COA, you're going to see things like pesticides, molds. You don't want any of that. So it is important to look at the COA. And I do represent, to be honest, several brands, and I don't really like to. I want to kind of keep it clean right now, and they're not sponsoring this event, so I don't necessarily want to mention the name brands, but you could email me, Christina, privately. Maybe I'm happy to say them to you, but in general, I really feel that this industry can go two different ways. It can be highly corporatized and with a lot of government control, but a lot of the people that really know about this medicine and really love this medicine are small farmers. So I really like to look at, and of course I'm for farmers going big because I want them to make the money, but I like to look at the small farmers, the ones that care about, you know, what I care about, which is when I feed my family, I want my kale and squash to be organic. So I am interested in finding those farmers that have those same kind of value systems that I do. And I know that like here, for example, in New York, you can find CBD in the gas stations. And I honestly just think that a lot of the small farmers, they're thinking about where they want their CBD to be sold. Like, you know, Dr. Catherine is a farmer, and she mentioned something about having them at the local farmers market. I think there's something to be said about that. But I do also come from the world of manufacturing, and I do understand, or not manufacturing, the supplement world, I should say. And I understand a little bit about, you know, CGMP practices, what Fiachra was referring to as, you know, that the supplement meets a certain standard. It's a little bit harder for CBD to get GMP standardized because it costs a lot to get that. And they have to be then in FDA approved facilities. They have to be manufactured there. So I think a lot of it is just doing, like, where do you want to buy your food? It is sort of, where do you want to buy your CBD? You know, I tend to like farmers from Kentucky and farmers from Vermont. I think that the soil there is much better than maybe somewhere in the Carolinas where a lot of tobacco has been grown, and tobacco sucks up a lot of toxicity. You know, there's just certain things like that that I might look at. But again, it's just like where, you know, there's something really special about locally grown, you know, organic food. And I think that that's kind of how I look for my CBD. But you want them to meet some kind of standard, like you want them to have COAs, and you want them to try to get certifications too. If not GMP, then at least a third party that's taking a look at their product.
And Dr. Shawn?
Yeah, so I look at two things really, bang for your buck and quality. So when it comes bang for your buck, I'm looking at, because so really you kind of have to throw the research out when it comes to CBD, because they use massive doses of CBD, like, you know, really popular anxiety paper used about 600 milligrams as a single dose. I mean, these types of doses are just, they're not feasible for the average person. You'd be spending like hundreds of dollars a month. So then I look to, you know, what's actually working with patients and what actually makes sense in reality. And I found that a sweet spot for a lot of patients is somewhere between 20 and 60 milligrams a day. So then you want to find something that is going to be a good price to get that amount of milligrams. So going back to Fiachra's point earlier, when, you know, you're doing the math, you know, how many milligrams does a bottle have divided by the cost, kind of figure that out. So yeah, if you could get more bang for your buck, that's a good way about to go about it, especially if you're thinking, okay, I'll probably need about 20 milligrams a day for it to actually be effective. But then again, some people are more sensitive. And then the other side of things, which we've all talked about, is the quality. So I do go on to, I mean, it's a bit of a unique situation here in Canada, because all the legal stuff is basically third-party tested according to certain government standards. So we know that it's pretty clean. But then, you know, the licensed producers, they're all different. So I end up going on their websites and reading a little bit about the company. I want to see that they're passionate about their product. I want to see that they know that, you know, full spectrum, broad spectrum is usually the way to go. So if that's available, I do agree that full spectrum, broad spectrum is probably going to be more effective than just an isolate. An isolate could be effective, but it's very like finicky with dose. You kind of have to really search for that sweet spot and stay there, because any bit less than that, any bit more than that, could negate all the beneficial effects. Whereas with a broad spectrum, full spectrum, you're more likely to have a larger therapeutic window, like a larger dose range where you can have a really good effect with it. So those are the two main things. And I do find with a lot of patients, I'll start them off on something that's just CBD, and hopefully that works for them. But a lot of the time I do find that adding a little bit of other cannabinoids, whether it be, in most cases it's a little bit of THC, does help it work a lot better. So just keep that in mind, that if the CBD, you're not finding it effective, don't throw it out the window altogether. You might want to experiment with another producer, or you might have to find something with a little bit of other cannabinoids in it, like THC, to really sort of bring it home for you.
All right. Thank you so much for your question, Christina. That's great. So I am just going to finish off with one last idea or concept. And that's kind of, we've all been touching on it a little bit, but why is this the plant? I mean, how are we all so enamored of this plant? And I mean, the history on the planet is incredible, thousands of years. I just read about another tomb where there was, and the use for this product was very specific. It was, it was about mysticism. It was about enlightenment. So how do we see this plant, the plant, moving us into the future?
Question. I guess I could start if
please,
everyone's okay with that. I'll put one point about the plant, in that it directly interacts with a really sort of important regulatory system in our body, the endocannabinoid system, which is sort of like a system that just maintains balance and homeostasis in the body. And there is a significant amount of research showing that a lot of these conditions that we would call like a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning that we really don't know why it's happening, like fibromyalgia, for instance, we're finding that there are lower amounts of endocannabinoids in these patients, whether it's in their cerebral spinal fluid or their blood. They're finding that these patients that have these conditions that we kind of don't know, or we didn't know up until now what was really causing them, it's quite likely that it has something to do with an endocannabinoid deficiency. And so here we have this plant that can both supplement some of those endocannabinoids and help our body not produce, but have a greater effect from the endocannabinoids that we already make. So, that's just one aspect of why this plant is really amazing.
And Dr. Selassie?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Dr. Shawn is saying. Like, our bodies are meant to receive this plant. We have receptors in our body for it. And many of our, other diagnoses of exclusion that have been shown to be associated with endocannabinoid deficiency are like IBS, migraine headaches, a lot of these chronic conditions that naturopathic doctors see all the time, and nobody has a real answer for it. But beyond that, it is a plant of enlightenment. It has sort of, especially plants with the THC component of it, which I don't really deal with now, but it does have a history of waking people up. It is a plant of enlightenment. But then even further beyond that, our environment, our world is really being raped, and honestly, this plant has suffered persecution, but it could be the answer for a lot of problems that we have with resources that are running out. It can be a renewable resource as far as food for livestock. It can be made into ropes and paper and all kinds of things that people are using. How in New York they just banned plastic bags. I think right before we went into quarantine, you can make degradable hemp bags and use them just as, use hemp in the way that you use plastic. So really, in many, many aspects of our lives as human beings, it's a medicine that we can use internally that our body has receptors for. It can help to heal our environment, and it can help to enlighten us in many ways mentally.
Fiachra, anything to add?
Yeah, just, look, actually fully agree with both Dr. Selassie and Dr. Mierowski. And I'll just add one thing. One of the things I think most powerful, and it's a little bit to what Dr. Selassie talked about, is that cannabis is a drug of awakening, and the way that works is that cannabis will play with the novelty factor, or the sensory adaptation that we kind of achieve as humans very quickly. So I don't feel the clothes on my body, and I don't question most of the things about my life. But what cannabis does is it removes the filters, it removes kind of the things you've become used to and put to the side. And obviously, we're having a conversation about menstrual awareness. Obviously, we're trying to lift the stigma that kind of still surrounds the topic, particularly here in Hong Kong and Asia. It's incredibly stigmatized still. So, if there's one thing that may not only help with the kind of the pain and some of the suffering that comes with the menstrual cycle, it could also be something that cannabis can also be something that helps, like, people to lift the stigma, to remove filters, and maybe reapproach the topic with an open mind.
So we are officially renaming it to Marijuana and Menstrual Awareness Day.
Love it.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your passion. And I hope we can meet up again.
Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Well done.
Many of us in Hong Kong here don't have our families nearby. Many women who give birth here expect their families to come over, their mums, their dads, their mothers-in-law, and that hasn't been happening. So there's been that sense of loss around that. It's like, hey, I thought that my experience was going to be like this, and it's completely different. So the Urban Hedge ethos and our mission always is to work with women and men towards a positive birth experience versus working towards a perfect birth experience. I've been a midwife for over 20 years, and if there's one thing that I've learned is you just never get any guarantees. Still is one of the safest places to give birth. So we've just been working really hard on preparing women and their partners on the fact that, yes, your experience is going to be different from what you had hoped. It is still going to be safe. Let's work around that. And then let's just see what we can do to make that experience as positive and as pleasant as possible. We always talk about, let's make life about the journey and not the destination. Pregnancy is about the journey, but laboring and birthing actually is about the destination. The destination really being a positive experience where essentially the outcome is a healthy mother, a healthy baby or healthy babies, and a process throughout she, the mother, and her partner, if there is a partner, feel supported throughout. And that's what we always aim for. So when I was little, I just asked a lot of questions, and I was very lucky in the sense that my mum was always happy to answer and answer honestly and guide me. So when it came about for her to talk to me about menstruation and periods and using pads, using tampons and all of that, it never felt awkward for me to ask her any questions because she always, now we say we create a safe space, and that is essentially what my mum did back then. It always felt safe for me to ask her anything I needed to know about, menstruation, about sex, and everything else. you know, and I really hope that for the generations that come way behind us, that the conversation around menstruation is not something that is taboo anymore. You know, we need to talk about this. Obviously, my specialty is pregnancy, postpartum. As I mentioned earlier on, Catherine, if we want women to journey through that significant phase of their life in the most optimal way, we need our women to know about their cycles, and we need our women to tune in with what their body needs.
It's wonderful that we have.
And one very interesting discovery that was made in Belgium actually is that the breastfeeding rates are going up since COVID-19, and you know, we're all realizing that it is most likely because of people being in lockdown and people being in confinement and not having to worry about visitors and not having to worry about that breastfeeding being interrupted. So I thought that that was a very, very interesting discovery. And I think, you know, what we're all going to take away from this is that, you know, let's look at confinement a little bit closer, and how we breastfeeding is not a form of contraception, and it should never be thought of as a form of contraception, because it's not gonna work. You know, breastfeeding doesn't stop your cycle from restarting after you've had a baby. Does it reduce the chances of your cycle normalizing after giving birth whilst you're still breastfeeding? Yes, by a bit, but it's not going to, you know, you can actually get pregnant whilst you're breastfeeding. In my opinion, and this is what we always try to work towards at Urban Hedge, is that postnatal recovery, the first thing that we need is support. You know, women need personal support from their inner circle, so to speak, and they also need professional support as and when is needed. We then need nutritional support. We need to work with our women on their breathing, you know, so that they're able to go from being in a state of fight or flight that comes by default with being a new mum, and help them into a state of rest and digest. And, you know, using a few minutes a day to do that. We also need to help them physically to recover. You know, there's so many changes that need to happen postpartum. So women also need that physical support, and that can come in the form and shape of movement, exercise, you know, diastasis recovery, pelvic floor health, core, you know, synergy, etc., etc. So postpartum recovery is something that has multiple factors, and rest is a big part of it, and that's very often the hardest one to achieve, actually. I have a course called Hatch, which is, as an egg is hatching. I know that my accent sometimes sounds like I'm talking about a hedge that you cut, you know, with a hedge cutter. But the course is called Hatch, and it's about helping women and men, or women and their partners, prepare for labor, birth, and postpartum. So I am big on postpartum preparation, because I feel that labor and birth is obviously important, but in the big scheme of things, it only takes up a very, very small amount. So the way that I structured the course is I felt it was very important to spend 50% of the content on labor and birth, and 50% of the content that's in that course is focused on postpartum, not just about the baby, but also about recovery for women, recovery for their partners, and a number of tips and strategies that partners can use to help support their women. And this is, it's, you know, I feel that that's really, really important. We offer that course as well with ongoing support, and to make that accessible and affordable for women, we decided to actually make it part of the online childbirth education course. So on a weekly basis, Twice a week, our members can hop online into a Zoom session that we organize for all our Hedge members. They can ask, one of our midwives the questions they have, and then once a week we do a guided relaxation session as well for everybody together. And that's just a real wonderful way to get people familiar with relaxation and getting themselves into that state of rest and digest. And it's also an excellent way for them to be able to ask questions to a midwife, rather than going on Google and having to read through the myths and the truths. Silly. And everyone in the class would be laughing because it was so silly. The Netherlands, on the other hand, have an excellent sex education program that is always well received, and subsequently they have one of the lowest teenage pregnancy rates in the whole of Europe. But I'm getting slightly sidetracked now. But yeah, so for me it was talking to my mom and also talking to my friends. I personally was quite late when I had my first period. I think I was about 14, so I was probably the last one in my group of friends. But it never worried me, again, because my mum was there to reassure me and say, hey, everybody is different. Don't worry about it. It will come. And it came.
And did you learn any rituals or any ways of acknowledging your body during that time?
So I do stuff for myself now, but that came much later. So that's not something that I learned from my mum. That is just something that I started doing over the years, probably the last 10 years or so. So I work with essential oils for myself. I'm not a qualified aromatherapist. And I just tune in with what my body needs, and then I try to feed it with what it needs, whether that's literal fuel, nutrition, or whether that's nutrition for my brain, for my soul. So I do that now for sure. And we need to do as professionals is help women to tap into that instinct, and to tap into their innate ability to look after themselves and look after their pregnancy and look after their babies. And I'm not saying that professional support is not needed, but we should be on the periphery, and the women are at the center of this. So I feel that it's really important that we encourage that, and that we actually make them believe in themselves.
So I'm bringing on Leslie Carol Botha, and she is going to talk to us about information that she has been passionate about for decades, and she's going to educate us on the perimenstrual period of during our cycle, and the importance of, I'm just looking for her, and the importance of recognizing when that is in order to time different treatments in your life and different activities that you might be doing. So I will let you just go right ahead. And Leslie, are you going to share your screen with us?
I will be sharing my screen with you, but let me do a
okay. You know how to do all that?
I know, yeah. A short introduction. Dr. Selassie, it's great to be on a video with you, and this was a very interesting conversation. I am a women's health educator. I am self-taught. For most of you women who are on this call this evening, I was just like you. I did not know anything about my body. I was not educated about my body. It wasn't until I walked into Planned Parenthood in the 1970s, which was a totally different organization than it is now. It was run by feminists and women who we wanted to give women the right to choose and the right to own their own bodies, and the right to, say when there was going to be a pregnancy and when there was not going to be a pregnancy. it was a very exciting time in my life, but I walked in for an appointment, and in 30 minutes, I learned more about body literacy, my body, my menstrual cycle, my hormones, my emotions, than I did in all my high school years and college years. And it was a pivotal moment for me. And my first response was I wanted to share this with other women. So I started volunteering. The director of the clinic took me under her wing and asked me, or took me into her office and said, read. And her office was filled with books about women, written by women. And the common theme of those books was the menstrual cycle, the sacredness of the menstrual cycle. It follows in religion, mythology, archaeology, anthropology, mathematics, and it's all about cycles. We are cycling beings. We are not governed by cycles. We are cycling beings. And for women living in a very linear world, which is Shawn, excuse me, and men here, it's very testosterone driven, meaning that it's minute after minute, day after day, month after month, year after year, we're like holding on to a tightrope because we're cycling. And that cycle is so important, and it's so important to our health, and it's important to our well-being. So after reading all of these books and working at the front desk, seeing women coming in month after month with the same ailments, and because when you're in a family planning clinic or a gynecological clinic, one of the most important questions that is asked is, what is the first day of your last menstrual cycle? I could see that these women were coming in at the same day of the month or close to, with similar ailments or the same ailments, herpes outbreaks, migraines, UTIs, fatigue, just general not feeling well. And I would look at their chart and I could see, well, you were here last month at the same time, and this month at the same time, 2 months ago at the same time, 2 months ago at the same time. And I would say, do you realize you're coming in on day 26 every single month? And the doctors, and the patients would be saying no, because we don't think in cyclical time. And that is a big problem for women. And that started me on my journey of what has led to actually now 35 years of work with at-risk girls, work with other women, blogging. I had a radio show for 30 years called Holy Hormones, Honey. And so let me just start at the beginning here. Can everyone see my screen? Let me just start, and we'll do the slideshow and start at the beginning. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is a menstrual cycle evaluation as an overlooked biomarker for medical injury. And this is not discussed anywhere. And it is something that needs to be discussed everywhere, because we have highs and lows to our menstrual cycle. We, at the time of ovulation, we can change the world, but when it's right before we have our period, which I call the perimenstruum, then we change. So these are the books. This is my book, Understanding Your Mind, Mood, and Hormone Cycle is my book. These are some of the other books that I have contributed my work to. And this next slide is what I call, and has been a seminal part of my work for a long time, Female Mystique, the Three Faces of Eve. We go through these three phases of our cycle, maiden, mother, wise woman, every single month. And yet we don't realize it. And they're tied into the moon cycles. And they're tied into our behaviors. And when we don't realize this as women, we become almost like lost at sea. And that's what happens to most of us. And when we don't understand our bodies, it is easier for other people or medical professionals acting in best interests, what they think are their best interest, to prescribe, suggest surgeries, medications that might help us, when in fact, understanding our bodies, understanding our reproductive health, understanding our menstrual health, understanding what happens during our hormone cycle is really the missing piece of our educational process, of who we are. And yet, this cycle, which is a triphasic cycle, which is found in archaeology and mythology and religions, all over the world, I mean, it's been documented, it's historical, is really what defines us. I don't want to say goddesses, but I know some women have been on here talking about the sacred aspects of the menstrual cycle. But it defines us, it defines our power. So let's look at this. The new moon, when we're pre-ovulatory, so what happens? After we get our periods, 3 or 4 days later, our hormones begin to rise. When our hormones begin to rise, what happens? We start feeling better. It's like, oh good, life is good, life is good. And then, so we're all these qualities, we're independent, assertive, we're going out to meetings, we're doing things, we're multitasking, taking care of kids, driving them everywhere, you know, making dinner, making lunches, working, not a problem, bring it on. All right, and then we have a slight shift as we're moving into the ovulatory phase, and we become a little bit more nurturing and giving, creative, loving. We want to stay home more. If we don't have kids, we're taking care of plants, we're taking care of cats, we're taking care of the house, we're taking care of ourselves. Or we're being very creative in artwork. It's a power time. Scientific studies have backed up that people do not understand this correlation between the full moon and our behaviors leads to emergency rooms filling up and jails filling up during the full moon. It's such a brilliant creative time, and nobody knows what to do with that energy. And when women are ovulating with the full moon, it's almost like a double whammy. So move to another week out, we go into the post-ovulatory phase, and please note that I don't use premenstrual, the post-ovulatory phase. And when it correlates with the waning moon, we become more reflective, psychic, our body slows down. Our body slows down to release the uterine lining. Our body slows down so that we can go into ourselves. And some people call it the dark moon, be more intuitive, reflective, psychic. And this is a theme through so many women's books written by so many brilliant women's authors. It has really been the foundation of our life. And think about it, when people did not have lights and fluorescent lights and street lights and everything around them, what do we live by? We live by the sun and we live by the moon. When the moon was full, we were more active. When the moon was waning, we gathered around the fire. We talked. Women went into hormone huts or menstrual huts or read tents. They shared, they gathered, they intuitive. Native American women in matriarchal tribes actually made plans for the next cycle. And that's what we do. We make plans for the next cycle. But one of the pieces that is missing to all of this, and there are lots of, and we've been subjected to a lot of different thoughts by a lot of different people from way back about who we are and the lack of importance and the lack of power that we have. But the importance of all of this is that the women who understand cycles are the women who make more informed choices about themselves. Now, what do I mean about that? I've been involved in so many different movements, and lately in the birth control movement, hormonal contraception, which suppresses ovulation, which is wreaking havoc on hundreds of thousands of women around the world. We went from PMS to PMDD, which we believe is chemically induced from progestin birth control. We've gone from postpartum depression to maternal psychosis. And for various reasons, nutritional reasons, cycle reasons. But I mean, some of this stuff has been so embedded in our thought process and thinking that we have no value, that we have become willing participants in a process that doesn't honor our bodies. So with cycle wisdom, our bodies are comprised of an exquisite network of communication, and functioning properly, it's like a harmony, a symphony. It provides us with a sense of peace and well-being, and the communication transfer relay of signals from the brain through the nervous system to every cell in the body is crucial. So not only is our body communicating internally, it's communicating externally through the pineal gland, which leads back to those lunar cycles, which governs every single cycle on this planet. Everything on this planet cycles. Our cell cycle, day cycle, year cycle, month cycle, everything cycles. That's what gives women power. So hormone stimulation is initiated in the brain. Hormone means to excite. Hormones are controlled by the endocrine system, which is a delicate rhythmic system. I don't have to read all of this to you, but circadian rhythm science is becoming more prevalent as we're starting to understand more about our bodies, hormone cycles, and the relationship. But most women don't realize that the endocrine system is their primary source for their biological clock. Our endocrine glands actually line up with the sacred chakras. That's how deep and that's how embedded that this go. Now, scientists, as I mentioned, now know that circadian disturbance or hormone imbalance can lead to fertility. It can lead to a lot of other issues. Now, how do I know this? One, I've researched it. Two, I worked with at-risk girls who were incarcerated, brought into a restorative care program, ages 13 to 17, and I developed a menstrual health education program for them because I wanted to teach them about body literacy. I wanted them to understand the relationship between their hormones and behaviors, because my premise was these girls were doing fine, and when they hit the premenstrual phase, they bottomed out. And guess what? I am showing you charts now of young girls, and I was only in the class with them twice a month, one to do charting with them, and another to do values, choices, women's history, whatever topics came up. And once they learned about menstrual cycles and their body and body literacy and the proper names for their body, instead of boobs, it was breasts and cunts, it was vaginas and vulvas, and we went through all of that. And respect for the body, instead of what they were being brought up with the slang and the degradation of the body, which does what? Does what? Keeps us victims of our bodies, right? We're taught at an early age that we're unclean, that we need to have hygiene spray. There were commercials or advertisements way back in the 40s and the 50s. If you look, and if there was no sexual intimacy in a relationship, it was a woman's fault because of her vaginal odor. And if I told you that Lysol was used for a vaginal douche, how would you feel? And yet that's what was done. Those were the advertisements. I have those advertisements. That's another whole presentation. But look at this young woman. Let's go back to this. So days of the month, of course, I covered their name. She was using condoms, cycle day, And here is a great example. In this young girl, I had many charts, but most of these girls would start off airy-fairy and charts and stickers. And I went to Kinko's or to FedEx now and put these charts, these grids on neon color paper, and it was 11 by 17. So it became like an art project to them. And their supervisor would then make them chart every day. So what we would see, depending on where the girl was in her cycle, is that everything was fine and good until she hit the premenstrual phase. And this is the common theme. Now let me bring this up to you. What does this mean? This is when they did drugs, alcohol, ran away, went into hormone rages with families, got pimped, got raped, attempted suicide, came back. A lot of times they didn't come back. This is one young woman. This young woman, again, she started off here on day 19, 2021. Look how dark, heavy her markings are. And after she hit her period, day 1, 2, 3 here at the top, things lightened up for her. When these girls, so I would do a month with these girls. I would make sure then I'd give them more paper, more stickers, more markers if they needed it. And we would write down all the symptoms in the same order, all right, because that was important. And then I would take their charts away. And then after the 3-month mark, then I would bring them out. So then they could see month 1, month 2, month 3. This young woman, here we are. I think she was on Depo-Provera. So here she was feeling pretty bleak. And you can see how her cycle progressed. And again, I wasn't with them every day. Their supervisor made them do this. And this young woman was the saddest case of all. And this is what we're seeing a lot of today. This young woman was sexually abused at 13. She was in a mental institution, was in jail, came into the restorative care program. We started charting. And this is what she looked like on the left-hand side. You can see it. She was a mess. Easy to see if she's a mess. But what happens? She lightened up. Right? She went from being a real mess to sort of, kind of some markings there, and then to X's. She was feeling better about herself. Now, the sad thing about this, before I got back to the school, because I was rotating between eight schools, is that she hit her premenstrual phase and she was like this again, and they put her back in the mental institution. But again, this is an extreme case, and she was severely abused and traumatized. She had a lot of different issues going on with her. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention to you, so that you know I have some science behind this, and I have written lots of articles. I have spoken at many conferences. I've spoken at the UK. We've seen the books where my work is. I am a big believer in teaching women about their menstrual cycles and how they affect their minds, moods, and behaviors. This is a study that came out during 1998 and 2001 on the timing of breast cancer surgery, menstrual cycle, and prognosis. And what these women found was that if women had surgery when their immune system was at its highest, which is at the time of ovulation, which is when we feel our most powerful, we have less medical ailments, physical ailments, mental, emotional ailments. We're more confident in ourselves. If our surgery was scheduled on within a window of time on the either side of ovulation, our prognosis came out much better than if we scheduled our surgery around, say, a doctor's schedule. I can't do your surgery until May 23rd, or now it's the end of May. I can't do your surgery until June 23rd. And we go, oh, okay, I'll be there. We don't take into consideration where we are in a menstrual cycle. When is our immunity the highest? When is our immunity the lowest? We do this all the time. We may be feeling like crap. Oh, but I've got a doctor's appointment. I need to go in for a vaccination. I need to go in for a surgery. I need to go to the dentist. And then we start having side effects. And then it just becomes a downward spiral for a lot of women. Because when we hit the paramenstruum, which is the week before our period and into our period, until our hormones start rising on the other side, our hormone levels drop, our immunity drops, we become more tired and more fatigued. There's not one woman on this call that is not aware of that. There is not one woman on this call that is not aware of that. Here is some science behind it. These people, and I have written articles and other papers, this research has been going on since the 1990s. So here I am in a doctor's office. My husband was head injured at the time, and let's see if I can find it here in this article. But I'm sitting there in the doctor's office waiting for him, and here I'm reading Glamour and McCall's magazine, and 1990s, mind you. I don't even, well, Glamour's still around, McCall's is long gone. But in the sidebar, it was like, oh, by the way, you know, if you paid attention to your menstrual cycle, you will live longer. You'll have less chances of dying and death. So this is one of the articles I found, April 1990. Keeping in step with your body's natural rhythms could add years to your life. And just read through it. 40 to 50,000 premenopausal women likely to suffer relapse and death. All right, then those are operated on near their menstrual period. Why the difference? Women's immune system varies with her menstrual cycle and may become most potent with ovulation, and her ability to fight disease may be significantly higher at that point of her cycle. What do? We hit the premenstrual phase, the paramenstruum. We go hopping off to the doctor and say, doctor, I feel like crap. He says, it's all in your head. He hands us a prescription for an antidepressant. And we take it. Here's another one. Life-saving news about your period. It's a prominent example emerging from a small but growing exploration of the relationship between women's hormonal changes and common illnesses ranging from migraines to irritable bowel syndrome. The Women's History of the World. This is one of the books I read back in Planned Parenthood. I'm trying to watch the time here, Catherine. For women with her inexplicable moon rhythms and power creating life was the mystery of the tribe, so miraculous, so powerful, she had to be more than man, more than human. As primitive man began to think symbolically, there was only one explanation. She was the primary symbol, the greatest entity of all, a goddess no less. Not anything that we've been taught, right? Not at all, but what if we were taught that? What if we were taught, instead of sex ed and birth control and STDs and the basic how to have sex, we were taught this. We were taught about our menstrual cycle. We were taught about body literacy. We were taught about when our immunity is the highest and when our immunity is the lowest, and what birth control, when you suppress ovulation, is going to be doing to our health, and including affecting our bone health, which causes osteoporosis or causes PMDD with all these progestin birth control methods on the market that are suppressing our natural production of progesterone, causing depression, anxiety, weight gain, agoraphobia, suicidal ideation. Again, there are thousands of women in these types of groups on Facebook. Let me just say, it's not just the women who are suffering. I've seen men traumatized. I've seen men with PTSD. I've seen children traumatized. Women are the nucleus. We are the nucleus of the atom. And when we are the nucleus, then the protons and the electrons, men and children, cycle around us. There's a pull, there's a gravitational pull, but we are the nucleus. We are the source. We understand the cycles. This has been documented. And when that nucleus is broken, the men and the children are they're free falling like we are. So what our cycles have become, because we've become so hormonally imbalanced, and let me pull out of this now and stop screen sharing. We become so hormonally imbalanced that we so our hormone cycles are more like climbing up Mount Everest. And then when we hit ovulation, it's like free falling. And for a lot of women, that free fall just doesn't end. And they don't know, it's like falling down a rabbit hole. They don't know if they're ever going to come out. It's like functioning one day and then not functioning the next day. And when women don't function, our families don't function. We can't function at work. And I heard this over and over again. Oh my God, what's wrong with you? And we get the same message from men, my God, what's wrong with you? Last week you were just so wonderful and loving, and this week you're such a bitch. And we go, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And we start believing that message of what's wrong with me. So my takeaway for all of you tonight, and I'll certainly be open to questions if anyone has questions, is, and if you're not on hormone birth control, start looking at your natural womanhood. Even if you are on hormone birth control, because if you are, you're going to be, I guarantee some of you out there having some pretty severe side effects from that. Start looking into fertility and fertility apps. Start bringing your men into the conversation. This is not a one-sided conversation. We should not be responsible to carry this burden of having choice. Now, I've been in this conversation long enough to know, and I was the tail end of a movement, because obviously I'm old enough, when women, feminists, were fighting for equal rights, which we never got. We were fighting for the right to choose, which we did get. But we're also fighting for the right to have birth control. In fact, we've had to fight for every single right out there, including the right to education, property, and the right to vote. So we've been fighting for a long time. Oh, and I have an aside for you. Do you know why the suffragist movement was able to win, to get the right to vote? Because those women in their Victorian gowns, in those long dresses, and the layers of clothes that they had to wear, why did they wear them? Was to prevent anyone to see them from bleeding. So in the suffragist movement and Gloria Steinem's movement was the first time that women had access to fem hygiene. So they weren't relegated to their homes to 1 or 2 times a week. That is the underlying reason to why those movements were so successful. So on the flip side of that, getting the right to have birth control, to be able to say, I want to choose when to have my children. I want to choose that I want to have them 2 years, 3 years, 4 years apart, whatever that looked like, became our right. What has happened now in the 20, 30, 40 years since that birth control came on the market, there's controversy about that, not going into that tonight. We had birth control pills, we had condoms. We had diaphragms. We had birth control methods that were in our control. What has happened now is that birth control now controls us. We go to the doctors. We get inserted, injected, and implanted with these devices that are dripping synthetic chemicals into our bodies that have long-lasting residual effects. And then we have to go back to our doctors and say, it's not working. And they say, oh, it's all in your head. Well, here, let's just try this. And we lost our bodies. So if anything, my life work has been on helping women understand the importance of body literacy, understanding their cycles, becoming a more powerful woman every single month of their life, understanding who they are, bringing their partners, their husbands into the conversation, into bringing their children into the conversation, doing things to support themselves, like the CBD and what everyone else has talked about today, to support their menstrual health. But this is the way that we are going to survive, because what is happening to women otherwise, hysterectomies, sterilizations, botched surgeries, botched birth control, is not a way that we can survive. And thank you so much for letting me be here and be part of this and say my piece tonight. Thank you, Catherine, so much.
Thank you. So we have some questions. I'm going to unmute Christina, and she has a question about moon cycles and her own moon cycle. So do you want to come on the screen, Christina, or?
Yeah, I think you have to invite me.
Yeah.
Oh, there. There you are. Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, wait, I'm gonna just, come here. I have a little boy.
So we had comments from, so many people were resonating with what you were saying, you know, about how birth control controls us, and people were just so inspired to teach their own daughters about your work. And I mean, I myself need to acknowledge, it's like I am listening to a mirror. I don't know when we spoke. It seems like 15, 20 years ago, but I feel like I say everything that you say. I mean, I created a moon calendar the last 3 years and I teach women to follow the moon, to follow their own moon, and using that cycle. And even to our evening tonight was following the maiden mother crone, you know, the ritual, the rites of passage, and then moving into our knowledge and moving into our power, and then in the end starting to nourish ourselves and release and let go, and then move back in. And
I sent you my hormone awareness guide. I assume you have every woman's email address, and please share that with them, because a lot of work went into that. But yes, in my research, my perfect world, my intuition, when babies come into the world, we are cycling with lunar rhythms, circadian rhythms. We are pure beings. When girls move into puberty, we move from that, and boys too, and we shift from that into our reproductive rhythm, which lasts for 20, 30, 40 years. And that's when we can cycle with the moon, cycle against the moon. If we understand where the moon is, we understand where our cycle is, we'll understand our mind's moods and behaviors. But when we then transition into menopause, and if we're not too endocrinely whacked out by that time, because those of us who don't cycle with ourselves or the moon are endocrinally just whacked, then we start cycling with the moon again. This is the way it's always been. Christina, I want to honor you because you had a question.
I'm back with my dog. I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of the journey of awareness. Anyway, but I'll just ask my question. So I'm bleeding on the full moon, and that makes me feel like my schedule's off balance when I look at your chart. And I was wondering if like, how can I get my schedule to be in rhythm with the moon, or is that important, or, you know, is it more a metaphor? Like,
it's more of a metaphor. Thank you for using that word, because there are so many things that shift for women. Our stress levels will affect our luteal phase or follicular phase, which is shorter once we hit ovulation, and it's generally 14 days until we have our period. But there are so many stress factors that can affect that beginning part of the phase. And generally, I have to share this with you folks. Once upon a time, and a very long time, every civilization on this planet lived with the lunar cycle. I think the Jewish people are the only people that live still with the lunar cycle. In 1542, the Romans created a false reality with the Roman calendar, which we now follow, which has to do with work and taxes, which is killing us. And truth. I mean, back it up and truth. But when we all lived with lunar cycles, oh my God, women were matriarchs. We were powerful. And before it was understood that men impregnated women with their sperm, it was thought that the full moon impregnated women. But it was much easier to cycle with the moon. So now, Christina, I would like you to see if you're cycling with different phases of the moon, understand, and I'll be glad to send you that chart that I started at the beginning, understand what that phase looks like, and if you're in conflict with it, or if you're in sync with it. There are 13 lunar cycles in a lunar calendar, all right? Coven, yes, 13 is a very sacred number to women for many different reasons. And just see if you're not moving through that moon cycle. And all you need to do is to have awareness. It's the full moon. I'm gonna get my period, damn it. So
yeah, I feel good about, like, I've been feeling good about it, but then it made me nervous.
You know, we've got, tickets to go to a concert, and the boyfriend's ready to go out, and let's go, and let's party, and let's do all these things, and you're like, I just want to take a hot bath. And then conflict arises. He's like, what? We got tickets, we're going out. You're, ugh. So you're torn. But if you understand where you are in your cycle and what the moon energy is doing, you're at peace with yourself. Instead of beating yourself up saying, why am I feeling like this? I was so excited to go to this concert. I've been looking forward to this event for a long time, and all I want to do is go to bed. All right? And then it makes sense to you instead of saying, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And he's saying, what's wrong with you? And he said, well, the moon's here and I'm here and it ain't happening, honey. Catch me next cycle. But I mean, just that awareness alone is empowering, and you will move through the moon cycle. So the real question to you is, are you having a healthy bleed?
Moderately healthy. I've been trying to get it under control.
All right, I would look into natural progesterone. I don't know if anyone's discussed that today. Most of us are estrogen dominant. We have very little progesterone, and progesterone is necessary to for a healthy uterine lining. It's also essential to prevent miscarriage. The first thing I would look at, if you're heavy bleeding, you're hemorrhaging. Let's get the language straight.
Yeah, I am.
Sorry.
That's okay. Just in the last 2 years, I had pretty traumatic events where I started hemorrhaging and ended up in the ER, and then I was told I had a fibroid, and then someone did a DNC to me that I now think was an extreme violation.
Yes.
and traumatic event that was not done with proper painkillers. And anyway, so
not anyway.
This
is every woman's story. This is what I've been talking about all night. So Dr. Selassie is going to be a fabulous support for you. A naturopathic doctor is going to be a wonderful support for you. Going the path that you're going down, or that you went down, which is a path we all go down, is not going to save our lives.
Yeah, there's no answers there.
Right.
Yeah.
So get your bleeding under control. Watch your cycle.
My cycle's normalized since then because I started seeking different things. And specifically what you just said about the estrogen, I eliminated a lot of things that were doing estrogen. I changed dietary stuff. I was very intentional and started looking at the cycles. So everything you're saying is on point, and I think that there's still more that can be done. And it feels challenging at first because our culture does not support it. But when you start doing it, I've started to see the differences. So cycling is crucial.
Cycling is crucial. Living with our cycles is crucial. Catherine, another question?
Well, let me mute. And does anyone else? I know there were comments, and also I want to share a video that was prepared for us on self-care, which was created by Dr. Millie Lytle. So I think we'll move on to our next section. And again, thank you so much. You really inspired and gave such a beautiful overview of the whole experience of being a woman and our history of, and so thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to close by saying that I know this because I lived it. And when I started living with my cycle, I became a whole different woman and continue to be that woman. And it is a powerful place to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amen. All right, so I'm going to show you a lovely video that was done by Dr. Millie Lytle. She's one of our sponsors for the event. She sponsored our Zoom room and supported me with that as well.
My name is Dr. Millie Lytle. I'm a naturopathic doctor and I'm the founder of NatMed Coach. And we have a virtual health club that helps people stay away from the doctor's office via self-care. And I'm very excited to be here. This is a really impressive event to have speakers from all over the world and guests from all over the world. So a big warm hello from New York. Well, self-care is very important to women because women do want to understand themselves better, the way their bodies work when they're participating in self-care. And self-care is essential in order to understand oneself. So in order to understand the connection between our emotions and our body and our mental sphere, you know, our psychology, it's important to tune into oneself and to notice oneself, how one's body behaves throughout the cycle, how one's body and mind together work, you know, for the good or the bad of oneself. And so it's so easy to engage in the medical normalization of painful periods, of distressing menopause. And self-care allows us to take that back in an individual way and to see what we can do about it and to help themselves. I think that they want to understand why their body does things and not be told and dictated to, or at least I hope. And as our bodies change, which they always do, we want to be understanding via, you know, education as well as day-to-day practice, how we can affect change and maybe move or shift our bodies into a place where it's more comfortable to be in one's body. We're talking about physical self-care, we're talking about emotional self-care, and sometimes we're even talking about social self-care. So tuning in is the most important thing on a daily basis, the best self-care and the most effective self-care. And when I say effective self-care, I'm talking about the prevention of chronic illness or chronic symptoms and the treatment of chronic symptoms, and in some cases, the reversal of chronic symptoms. So for me, self-care is the way to own our own healthcare at home. When we go to the doctor's office, we check in, we, you know, get a prescription, but with self-care, it's something that we're working on just a little bit every day, and hopefully in a pleasurable way, to understand ourselves better. And that's the first step, is checking in. What's your body telling you? Even what's your mind and emotional state telling you? And that can be done with journaling, or it can just be done with a simple check-in in the morning. How am I feeling today? What's my body saying? Or later on in the day, what changed? You know, how is my stress affecting me? Is it affecting me? What happened today to throw me off course? And just these kind of non-judgmental check-ins are so important for us so that we can go to that plane with ourselves and get to know ourselves on that level. What really concerns me is when I see commercials for birth control or for pain medication that kind of bypasses the individual and treats one's period as a time that's just to get over with or to be ignored, or that can just be downplayed as if it's not a vulnerable part of our life. The cycle also for menstruating women is a check-in with where our health really is, because we can measure our own health over those 30 days, 40 days, 21 days, whatever's happening. And as we get educated, we can start to be proactive. So at the beginning, it's a checking in, and then it's an education. And in some cases, if there's trauma, if there's stress, if there's habits that one wants to change, then we can engage in those things. But of course, there's also the acknowledging of the pain, feeling into it, where it comes from on all levels. And I don't, that's physical pain, but it's also emotional pain or anything that we want to run away from, or that we've been conditioned that we just want to get rid of or ignore or avoid. The cycle, or either the premenstrual time or the time of menses, is the time to be very forgiving of ourselves and of others, and a time to rest, and a time to do all those nurturing things for ourselves that we might not otherwise give ourselves permission to do. And so in terms of ongoing self-care, I really feel like that most vulnerable time of the month, whatever time that is for you, and for some women it's weeks. And then there's also steps that can be done, to improve that. But so that to get to a place where we're not fighting our bodies, because when we're fighting our bodies, we're creating emotional and psychological conflict within ourselves, and we're judging ourselves. And so self-care is about disarming all of those things, that we're accepting ourselves, we're loving our bodies, we're a friend to ourselves, we're supportive, we're our own champion, and we're giving ourselves the right to have a rest, and to say no to the outside world for a period of time, or to say no to our partners or our children, or to go to bed, or to do something different, to take a different approach during that vulnerable time. Provide educational content for women on different health topics. We have educators, naturopathic doctors, health coaches who coach in nutrition, detox, different conditions, chronic fatigue. You've been on there, Catherine, talking about moon cycles. So we really do engage in this mind-body educational programming. And then we also do community coaching. So it allows people to get educational, informative nutrition content, and then also allows people to get one-on or small group counseling to check into their own individual progress. So, you know, a big and important part of self-care is that we're making our own choices and also taking responsibility for the choices that we make. However, there's also a massive opportunity for us to really engage in taking care of ourselves from home and in a different way. And so I do see this time as a big opportunity to make that shift. And just that probably for the foreseeable future, there will be some changes in healthcare as well. You know, physicians are going to start working more telemedicine. And so it really begs it to be in the hands of the individual to start taking more responsibility over their own healthcare, which is also basis about what we put in our mouth, what time we go to bed, how we talk to ourselves, how we think, you know, what spirals our thoughts go down. And I'm not saying that it's not a lot of work. It can be a life's work, and it is my life's work. So that's the position that I'm coming from, both as a naturopathic doctor, but also as someone who I feel personally like I've had to engage in self-care in order to live. And so I take it very seriously. So I do see this as an expansive movement, not just, you know, doing one's nails and one's hair. And that's fun too. Fun self-care is great. But I see medicine moving in this direction where people will be their own doctors, so to speak. I mean, I see massive technology happening as well, and I'm sure that will. But then also there's this grassroots movement towards people, you know, not just giving themselves over to the doctor's orders anymore, but actually becoming their own doctor. And that's really, you know, my mission, my passion. There is such a massive injustice going on that girls are not taught about the stages of the cycle. What happens, that most women in the world still do not know how to avoid pregnancy or how to become pregnant, that we rely on medical intervention and also hail that as the feminist act of the century or of the last century. I mean, I think that is criminal. And we've been brainwashed into thinking that drugs are the way forward, the way that we need these drugs in order to protect ourselves or to control our bodies, when in fact, tribal women were doing it long ago. And so I think that everybody, it's up to us, it's up to mothers to become educated on periods, and for, if it's not happening in the school system, you know, which is where it should happen, in hygiene class, that we have a less flippant approach to teaching our daughters about what a period is, and also about resting during that time, because we really pass down our attitudes about our expectations around our periods to our daughters, even without doing it. You know, we talk about horrendous childbirth, we talk about horrendous periods, and what you know, the woman's bane, you know, is being this cyclical life that we live, which is somehow negative, when in fact it empowers us to, you know, bring other people into this world or to avoid it, and also makes us a collective which share this fundamental biological and spiritual process. And yeah, I really encourage everybody to read The Red Tent by Anita Diamond. I just think that book is brilliant in terms of feeling into the soul of menstruation, even though it's so far from modern day. You know, I'm living in New York City. Bright lights control everybody's cortisol levels and our diurnal rhythms. Whereas in The Red Tent, you know, there's no lights. And so it's an amazing dream world to go back to and re-envision and reinvent how we see periods. To acknowledge that this is the monthly time, and that it's okay. And it doesn't mean that I'm defective or that I can't do a lot of things. You know, I do a lot of things, but I've just worked to create, you know, a very kind of loving, genuine, and healing environment for myself during that time. And I let myself bleed, and I feel, you know, I feel the menstruation. And if there's a bit of pain, I mean, I used to get very bad cramps, but then I got acupuncture, and so that for the most part took care of them. But if I get a little bit of pain, you know, I take magnesium, I take a bath, I go to bed, and I just kind of breathe into it and feel it, and try to identify where my pain's coming from, and just let it go, you know? So I do things like that. And it's evolving practice, but I do not see my period as a burden. I see it as like, you know, a welcome part of my life that I want to hang on to for as long as possible. You know, the best, or the women who are going through menopause, I think the best thing that we can do is to start mentoring somebody. So if you're a mother or even a grandmother at that time, then you might have people to mentor. But to take a different role gradually in one's life, I think is a really important detail, because by that time, you know, by mid-40s, mid-50s, you do have wisdom, or one has wisdom having been through life, and it's time to kind of move up and take a different type of responsibility. So whether that's in business or in the home, or just in social standing or community, however that means for the individual, I think that that's one of the most important details of perimenopause and menopause is moving oneself up to a different level of acceptance. And detox is another kind of simulated time for vulnerability. And that's one thing that I love about detox, is that we're not making it about our cycle as much as making it about a time to create a ritual to clean ourselves out and to get a little bit more vulnerable in our bodies, and to, you know, tune in even more. It's a great way to pay attention and get to know our bodies even more. So that's starting June 1st, if anybody is interested in doing a month-long detox. The detox itself doesn't start until June 13th, but we're having 2 weeks of prep leading up to it, where I'm teaching all sorts of instructional videos. And then we'll take you through the whole journey, and it's going to be fun. All the best, everybody. It's been a great being here.
Well, I've initially was interested in the triggers of puberty, and that is still part of my research program. But as I was just learning about the developing female reproductive axis, this seemed to be a real black hole, that there has not been enough research looking at sort of the end of puberty, which is when girls first start developing their menstrual cycles. And for the most part, the first 2 years, they're very irregular, or they can be in some girls. And I think for a general pediatrician, it's often hard to counsel girls on what's going on, because even by looking at just how frequently the cycles are occurring, we've learned that really doesn't tell you anything about the underlying hormone patterns. So girls who are having occasional ovulatory cycles where the egg is normally released, and then you know, for which becomes important for fertility purposes down the line, they can have irregular cycles, meaning some are longer, some are shorter, or the exact same thing could be happening with a girl who's never ovulating. And so I really wanted to understand where is there still immaturity in the reproductive axis? Why don't we go from being fertile women from the first period, and how does that process happen? And it's actually very important for understanding infertility in adult women, because this is when it all starts, and it's really too late. You know, you can put a Band-Aid on it or give IVF drugs later on, but if there's going to be a time where an intervention might shift things in the right direction, it's really going to be during adolescence or earlier. So we're doing this through daily urine sampling, and we're working with a company called ZRT Laboratories out of Oregon. And basically this, instead of the girls having to collect test tubes of urine every day, they kind of pee on a strip, kind of like a urine dipstick from your chemistry lab days that would tell you pH and stuff like that. And then those strips can just be put in a Ziploc in the freezer. They're stable for months and maybe years. And then we just send them in batches to the lab. And we measure all of the relevant reproductive hormones in them. One advantage is that our cycles are really telling the story of our body's overall health, right? Anything that is stressing us mentally or physically, cycles are going to be affected. And that's kind of an evolutionary thing, right? If we're in a stressful environment, then our body doesn't want to be putting our resources into reproduction. It's not a good time to be having kids. So yeah, I think it is a vital sign of what's going on in our body. In the normal menstrual cycle, as the egg or the follicle is growing, it's making more and more estrogen, and that actually signals the brain to release a hormone called luteinizing hormone, and that triggers ovulation. And that also, so then the remnants of the egg are what produce continue to produce estrogen and progesterone, and that remnant is called the corpus luteum. And so that's the typical normal cycle, is the egg makes estrogen, there's ovulation, and then the progesterone acts on the lining of the uterus that's been thickened by estrogen, and it's shed, and then, you know, it's cyclic. But that lining, so in a girl who's not ovulating, the lining can only get so thick before it just degenerates on its own. So that's one of the reasons for the irregular bleeding, is there's nothing sort of regulating that process in the same controlled manner as in an ovulatory cycle. It's just an unstable, thick lining, and when it's, you know, ready to degenerate, then there could be spotting, or there could be full-on heavy bleeding because it's gotten so thick. But the timing of that is unpredictable and could vary from woman to woman on, you know, what that lining is like. So if we measure their hormones and it looks like they're making enough estrogen, but you know, ovulation for whatever reason isn't happening, then they could be treated with like a 2-week course of low dose progesterone, or 10 to 14 days every month, or even if it's just sort of protective, to make sure they are getting progesterone, say every few months across the year. I was on birth control, and they would say, "So are you having a cycle every month?" Like, yes, you know. Well, obviously I am. But to go further, and why are you on? You know, so it can't be this sort of checkbox. Yes, asked her cycles every month. So it's got to be a little more than that, just to emphasize. And now with these menstrual cycling apps, there's just a huge wealth of information. And there was this big study of thousands of users, I think in the journal like Nature Biotechnology. And it was like an international study, anonymous, but users of these apps agreed to share their data with the investigators. I forget what the average cycle length still came out to be, around 30. But they mentioned that women have been told that a normal cycle is 28 days. And so and this has come up in other settings where, you know, people are studying the genetics of the menstrual cycle, and it's all just asking a woman what her length is, and can you trust someone if they say 28 days, or is that just what they think you want them to say? Yeah. So the average age for breast development is now around 10. But some girls, you know, it's starting around 8, particularly in Black and Hispanic girls. And the average age of the first period is still around 12 and a half. But I would say that, yeah, it should be part of the larger conversation about puberty in general. So I just want to clarify, there's nothing, this is the hope for the future, right? There's no magic pill right now to say that we can change things, but I still think it's an important opportunity. And yeah, so during adolescence, girls with irregular cycles are often treated with birth control pills because we don't know why they're having irregular cycles, and we want to make sure that they're exposed to the right amount of estrogen, which is important for healthy bones, and progesterone, which causes the withdrawal bleeding. And that's because, so estrogen exposure will thicken the lining of the uterus. And if there isn't ovulation, there won't be progesterone released. And so if a girl is going cycle upon cycle without progesterone exposure, the lining continues to thicken. And in extreme cases, that's a risk for endometrial cancer. There have been very few reports of this in adolescents, but you know, the risk is not 0. And the same thing is true for adult women. So anyway, that's why the progesterone and the withdrawal bleeding is important. But that being said, again, this is a Band-Aid during adolescence, and it's because we don't know what's going on, and it's a little hard to, you know, you don't want to put a young girl through any invasive testing, so it works for the moment. I would say, you know, in adult women, again, if they're on a birth control pill, that's again offering the same 2 protective things, bone health and prevention from endometrial cancer. But again, it's just kind of a waiting game until, okay, now we have to figure out what does my own body do, and what was the reason that I was started on the pill initially. Invitation, and good luck with your event.
I am so grateful to all of you for being here, and I just want to acknowledge you for showing up. I have 2 treats coming up for you. I have Jema coming, I think. I don't see her yet. But what I wanted to do is just open up and allow others to just share the experience. If people could just maybe think of one word that is kind of resonating for you right now. I think, wow, the self-acceptance is coming up for me. And I am wondering if everyone could, if they'd like to, just share a word, and I'll go around and let people speak or not speak. So if you, as you notice, so this is hard. Donna? No?
I'm here.
Do you have a word for us?
Me? Donna?
Yeah.
Oh. No, I'm just soaking everything in. I mean, I guess quickly I would just say that I'm really glad that I was able to listen in, especially on the CBD portion, because I had I got a lot of information. So that was definitely very helpful. And yeah, I'm going to be looking into that a lot more because I've been hearing that, but I've never actually sat down to do research or listen to anyone talk about it. So this was the first time being able to hear about it, and especially from doctors. So that was really helpful. And from those in the study of it more thoroughly. So yeah, that's it.
Oops. And just in the interest of time, I'm just, if everyone could just focus on just like sort of one word that's resonating for them. I have our next two speakers up. So as you're thinking of that as well, let me know whether you are interested in joining the breakout room or would like to stay in the main room. So Ajira, do you have a word for us?
Curious.
Curious, great. And Ala? And Andrew?
Radical self-love.
Nice. And Christina?
Excited.
Oh, and Daniela?
Grounded.
I liked And Dr. Selassie?
Love.
Nice. And Jema?
Excited. I'm excited.
Excited. And Yana?
Listening.
Nice. Thank you. So we have our two leaders of our next session. So I am going to take everyone into the sacral steaming, and I'll have to leave Jema for just a minute by yourself. I'll leave you on speaker, but I'll be back.
That's totally fine. Evening, everyone. I'm Jema. Hi, it's lovely to meet you all. I'm a menstrual cycle educator and coach. I'm based down under. I live in Australia, so it's Friday morning here, just before 12 noon, actually. I'm coming to you live from the future. I'm really excited to be here, a part of Menstrual Awareness Day internationally. It's a really beautiful time of the year as we're going through a transition from yin and yang phases. We're also very much getting used to transitioning in our own bodies. And I thought what I might do is kick it off. I know I can't see any of you, which is okay, but I would love to hear from you in the chat box. Please let me know whereabouts you live. Say, hi, I live here. Hang on, the host is inviting me to the breakout session. No, I don't want to go there. Yeah, so in this chat, we're going to be talking about the seasons of our cycle and getting to know the full 4 phases of your cycle. Myself, when I guess I'll share some of my story and my journey and how I got into the industry of becoming a menstrual cycle educator, and how unlocking and getting to know your cycle throughout the 4 phases has been so fundamentally transforming for me, I think is an appropriate word to use. I started menstruating when I was 15 years old. I'm currently 33. I feel old when I say that. Not that 33 is an old age. And when I transitioned from pre-period to period, it was definitely a time in my life where I didn't really know what was going on in my body. At the age of 16, I went on the contraceptive pill, and I stayed on the pill for about 16 years. And when I decided to come off the pill, I actually didn't get a period for 9 months, and everything kind of went all over the place. And I very much lost control of my body, and I didn't know what was going on. At the time, I've always been very passionate about health and in the health industry. And I had been working as a coach in the health industry through nutrition and wellness coaching and Ayurveda, if you haven't heard of that, traditional Indian medicine. And I started to work more with my own cycle, but that all the women that I were working with really wanted to learn about their own cycles too. I guess this is what I was learning about, so I was talking a lot about it. And throughout that transition and that period of my life, only a few years ago, I started to really become a menstrual cycle educator and teaching women about how to understand their body in a very different light. After having studied ancestral health and Ayurveda, both very old, ancient ways of looking at your body and your health, I discovered that there is so much more to understanding your menstrual cycle than just knowing when you bleed and that you ovulate. In fact, there's 4 beautiful phases of our menstrual cycle, and knowing this information can literally transform your health as a woman, and it helps you understand how you feel emotionally, how you feel mentally, how you feel nutritionally, and also what's going on physically with your body. So for myself, I always like to start out with a check-in. I'm on day 2 of my menstrual cycle, which is today is the 29th of May, so the day after Menstrual Awareness Day. So on day of the Menstrual Awareness Day here in Australia, I got my period, which I thought was a huge and beautiful celebration and very aligned. And for me, I'm checking in with a little bit of slowness. I'm definitely craving some more nurturing, and I'm in the middle of my inner winter. So let me talk to you and explain to you a little bit more about these seasons. Now, there's only a few of us here, so I would love to hear from you. If you don't know where the chat box is, if you're on your phone, if you tap your phone, you'll see some options down the bottom. If you are on your computer, there will also be some options underneath the video that you can see there, and you can click chat and come and tell me in the chat box what day of your cycle are you on and how are you feeling right now. Additionally, what do you find the most challenging aspect of your menstrual cycle? Let me know. What do you find the most challenging aspect of your menstrual cycle? Now, Yana, I can actually hear you. So if you would like to verbally speak, you can definitely do that. You're unmuted. But what do you find the most challenging aspect of your menstrual cycle? For me, my most challenging aspect of my menstrual cycle was always, 1, not knowing when I was going to bleed, and 2, the fact that I really didn't like how my body was. I really felt uncomfortable with my body. The time between ovulation and menstruation was always very erratic for me. I always felt very emotional and highs and lows. And then I was like, I want to eat everything out of the pantry, everything out of the fridge. Look out, I'm going to literally clear the kitchen empty. And I got those carb cravings. But today I'm going to share with you about the 4 phases and the 4 seasons of your cycle and getting to know those, because they're a foundation of looking at your cycle in a new way. And I'm a really big believer that your body confidence all begins with your menstrual cycle. I mean, I run a podcast called The Well Women Podcast, and the whole podcast is literally revolved around getting to know your body as a woman. And the more you can get to know and understand your body throughout the 4 phases, the more you can literally understand how your body's moving and progressing throughout your menstrual cycle. Hey, Catherine. Oh, just lost your video.
Do you want my video?
No. I thought you were going to talk. I was just about to get started pretty much. Just shared a little bit of my story and how I got to where I am today and what I do.
Awesome.
But let's talk about the 4 phases of our cycle. So I hope I'm saying your name. Shyla says, I have 40 something days menstrual cycle. I'm on day 22 and I'm ovulating at the moment. I feel good and creative. Yes, I love that inner summer vibe. So when we look at our menstrual cycle, I like to break it down into 4 sections. Technically, I like to really break it down into 5, but I'll get to that in a moment. So understanding your body as a woman is that as a cycle, I know they say you have a general 28 to 29 day length cycle. Doesn't matter how long your cycle is. Like Shayla said, hers is 40 days. Beautiful. The length of your cycle is like your own fingerprint, literally. It's unique to you. And I say whatever your cycle length is, as long as you experience no cycle signs, that's perfect and in balance and in harmony for your body. So it doesn't matter just like what bra size you are or what pant size you are compared to your girlfriend or your mom or another colleague at work. It's unique to you, just as your cycle is. However, what happens is that we live in a very patriarchy style world, which is very masculine dominated. There's a big shift going on in that balance at the moment, which I'm very excited about. But having lived in this way for the last at least 4 to 5 decades, if not much longer, we generally run on a 24-hour cycle, or we're taught to run on a 24-hour cycle. You see, women run on a monthly cycle, which on average 28 to 29 days. Mine's roughly 29 at the moment. And that means that every single day of our cycle is going to look uniquely different. So roughly, I'm on day 2 of my cycle today. And if I had a 29, 28 day cycle, this day and how I feel today, how my emotions are balanced today, how my hormones are balanced today, is only going to happen another 12 times in the next 365 days. How I feel today is only going to happen another 12 times in the next 365 days. So that means that every single day is going to look extremely different. So no wonder we act differently and feel differently in the way that we ate food last week and were craving pizza versus this week we want a salad, and your partner or a friend in your life or someone you live with might be like, I can't understand you. Every day you're like completely different. And this is why it's your menstrual cycle. You see, the men in our lives, they run on a 24-hour cycle, meaning that how their hormones are right now at say 8 o'clock at night or 10 a.m. in the morning is going to be the same roughly every single day. Whereas women, ours is consistently evolving and changing as we go through the highs and the lows of our hormone shifts throughout a monthly cycle. But when we understand this, it can get really confusing to begin with. And this is why I like to connect this with the 4 phases of our cycles. Let's go through them really briefly, and then I'll come back and highlight each of the phases. So we have our beginning phase, which is menstruation. This is our bleeding time, also referred to period. We're on our period, or we have our period. This particular phase of our cycle lasts anywhere roughly from 4 to 7 days, depending on the woman. Now, every woman bleeds for a slightly different length of time and feels slightly different around their bleeding time. I like to say, if you don't experience any cycle signs and you have a 6-day bleed, that's perfect for you. If you have a 6-day bleed and you have extreme pains, bloating, cramping, and you're also constipated, not to mention you feel like you could rip someone's head off with your emotions, then I'd be looking at, hang on, what's going on in my body right now that's making me a little imbalanced? So that's our first phase of our cycle, winter. I refer to this as the season of winter. It's our inward season. Then we move through into what we call the follicular phase of our cycle. The follicular phase, if you went and got a blood test, this would be listed as the FH stage of your cycle. This is where the follicular hormone is being generated. And this is the phase that leads us from menstruation to ovulation. So you can call it post-menstruation, pre-ovulation as well. Personally, I like to teach and educate to refer to this particular time of your menstrual cycle as inner spring. Literally, this is like spring outside. Now, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you are kind of like stepping into spring right now, if not already kind of in spring, depending on where you live. And you will know that it feels exciting. It feels creative. You feel like you want to start taking action again. You want to get outdoors. I refer to this as like the bear in the cave, where you've been inside in winter and it's been cold, you've been cuddling up, and as soon as the snow starts to melt away and the first little greens sprouts through the trees for a leaf, it's like, oh my God, I'm alive and I can be outside, and you get all excited. This is your inner spring phase, your follicular phase of your cycle. The second stage. This part of your cycle lasts anywhere from 7 to 10 days, depending on the length of your cycle. Then we move into the third phase of our cycle. This is known as inner summer, also ovulation. It's our shortest phase of our cycle. It lasts anywhere from 3 to 4 days, and it's very dependent on the specific woman as to when it occurs in her cycle, all dependent on your cycle length. Inner summer is the time for women where we are literally birthing and creating. And birthing doesn't necessarily mean we need to be birthing babies. A lot of people think it's babies, or we need to be birthing something physically or conceiving. Rather, this stage of our cycle is all about birthing and giving our energy externally, which is completely opposite to 2 weeks earlier in your menstrual cycle in a winter when you're menstruating, and instead of your energy going outward, your energy is coming inward. Inner summer is a very fun, flirty stage. I know Shayla, I hope I'm pronouncing your name wrong, right. And if I am doing it wrong, please come off mute and let me know. But yeah, Shayla's on day 22 for herself right now, but she's ovulating. And so I'm sure you feel like this right now. You kind of feel confident. I call this the sexy and sassy stage of your cycle. You want to like get out there and be all bold. And that is our third phase. Then we move into our fourth phase of our menstrual cycle. And the fourth phase of our menstrual cycle is known as inner autumn. This is the longest phase of your cycle. It can last anywhere from 10 to 14 days. It's also known as the luteal phase of your cycle, also referred to as pre-menstruation and post-ovulation. This is the stage of your cycle where most women feel completely unlike themselves. And if that is you, or you know someone else who might be in this, I guess, state of mind or frame of mind during this time of their cycle, it's a good identifier that there's something going on in their body that's feeling a little bit imbalanced. This particular phase of your cycle, I like to break down into two parts, inner autumn 1 and inner autumn 2. This is because halfway through this particular phase of your cycle, you have a big shift and change of your hormones. This is where your progesterone has its last big peak before it dips and goes all the way down to ground zero for menstruation again to begin your next cycle. And this is where some women can feel extremely different from the first half of their autumn phase to the second half of their autumn phase. So this is kind of where I like to break it down into like two halves to make it much more understandable for everyone when it comes to your cycle. But these are the 4 main phases of your menstrual cycle. Let me know in the chat box, who has not ever heard of your cycle being referred to as seasons when we're talking about the different phases of your cycle? So we have inner winter, inner spring, inner summer, and inner autumn. I find this really easy to understand. We have our outer seasons. So for me here, it's autumn in the Southern Hemisphere. We're literally about to step into winter, and I'm so ready for winter to just be here already. And we have these different transitions from our outer seasons to our inner seasons. And it's very, very amazing to understand the differences with the seasons outside. But what if you could take the same principles and the same philosophies of the outer seasons into your inner seasons? So Dr. Catherine said, I have heard, but I didn't know the names. Amazing. So yeah, the inner seasons are very interesting. So let's go through a couple of important factors around each of the inner seasons. You see, when it comes to living in tune with your cycle, how does that look for me, or what does that look like for me? I like to consider this the way that I eat my food. So how do I eat in tune with my cycle? How do I move in tune with my cycle? And how am I feeling in tune with my cycle? And this feeling might be emotions, it might be my creativity, it might be my inwardness, it might be my externalness. All of this shifts and changes throughout each of these phases. So what I thought would be a really great thing to do for this particular chat today is to share with you some of the core features and identifiers between each of the different phases of your cycle. Who's excited, or who would like me to share about this? Let me know. I'll just grab a quick drink. Okay, Andrea said yes. And Catherine's got a big thumbs up. I didn't know you could do emojis. Oh, that's what their reactions are. Oh, just did a clap. Okay. I've been using Zoom for so long. Didn't know that you could do that. Okay. That's great. Thank you so much. All right. So let's kick it off with inner winter. Perfect timing for me because I'm in inner winter right now. So inner winter, and Yana said, yes, please. Great. So inner winter is very much about your inward time. So think about it like outward winter. What are the foods you like to eat when it's cold outside? You want to stay warm. You want to have like the soups, the stews. Catherine said hot cocoa. Yeah, like a hot chocolate. For me, my favorite thing is making a nice turmeric and chocolate hot drink. So I warm the milk and I put in some turmeric, like Ayurvedic powder. It's like a herb mix that I've put together, and some cacao. So for me, and some honey. For me, that's definitely what I love to do. Inner autumn, so when you're menstruating, is exactly the same. You want to keep your body warm, and you want to keep your body warm with the foods that you eat and the liquids that you drink, but also your actual physical body. This is a great time to wear extra clothes. You want to warm yourself up. But when it comes to movement, I'm going to encourage you to do slow and steady movement with your body as opposed to high energy style movement where you generate heat in your body. Here's why. When it comes to menstruation, most women refer to their PMS or their cycles. I call PMS cycle signs. They refer to your cycle signs as everything happens whilst I'm menstruating. I have heavy periods, I have light periods, I have stagnant periods, I only spot, I get headaches, migraines, I am in I'll just say in a lot of pain. You might get constipated, you might have diarrhea. All of these things generally can come back to being supported by living in tune with your cycle whilst you're menstruating. So if you have a stagnant blood flow, I would encourage you to warm your body up. So this is the food element. This is also the movement element. So when it comes to moving your body, a lot of women generally push themselves. We live in a world, being a patriarchy style world currently, we're very much led to like, do more, have more, be more. Who else feels like that? Do more, have more, be more. And the women can do everything men can do, and we can keep doing this. And I don't doubt it at all. But when we're menstruating, it's a really important time to recognize that this is our inward phase of our cycle. And being an inward phase, we want to slow down. Andrea said, amen, amen, is that we want to be able to slow down and turn inward. And so what this might be for maybe 2 or 3 days is we might maybe just not be so hard on ourselves. We might just have reheat dinners from meals that we've made a few nights before. We might not do the housework. We might not force ourselves to go and catch up with friends or family if we're feeling uncomfortable in our bodies. What happens is when we start nurturing ourselves through the inner winter phase, this means that we can actually gain more balance in the other phases of our cycle too. So when it comes to movement, it's probably the biggest thing that I love to talk about in making cycle changes for yourself is don't force yourself to exercise. I don't use the word exercise often. I'd rather use the word movement. More importantly, it's important that you just move your body. That's it. Just move your body. What could that look like when you're menstruating? That can look like light walking, not strenuous walking. It might look like just stretching on the ground. It might look like the Kali yoga practice, which is something that I teach inside the Well Women Academy that I run. It might look like legs up the wall. It might look like a nice massage, like a self-body massage. Something nurturing that creates movement within your body, because your body's detoxing as you're menstruating. So helping with this movement can help release and detox things from your body too. So it's a great time to do that. Let's move into inner spring. Inner spring, in terms of our food, is the time literally where we want to start having more fresh food. I like to think of this as we might have like some chicken or I love having like a nice, beautiful cooked piece of fish with some salad. And I bring in and welcome in more fresh style foods as opposed to long and slow cooked foods. Your body's digestive system is actually becoming more confident. It's improving its the metabolization of your food is increasing. And because of this, our emotions are also feeling quite heightened in sense of creativity and getting things done. If you have a job that you like to be productive or creative in, inner spring is the time of your menstrual cycle where you will literally be able to write no tomorrow. You could like literally write out all these newsletters, or you could write out all emails, or you could for me, I might creatively put together an ebook. I might write some course content. For me, this is the phase of my cycle where I'm feeling really creative. Energetically and movement wise, this is the time of your cycle where you want to try new things. I'm always telling women, try the dance class. If you want to if you're thinking you'd like to try something like, I think I might like to go to boxing, or maybe I want to try yoga out, or try Pilates, or maybe I want to try surfing, or maybe I want to try hiking or mountain bike riding, whatever it might be. Inner spring is the time where your hormones, as estrogen is rising as we lead towards our ovulation, our confidence is high. So trying something new for the first time in your inner spring stage is actually going to see you have a better experience in that trying of the thing that you want to try, as opposed to forcing yourself to do it. So there's a couple of points about inner spring. I want you to know that a lot of women wish inner spring lasted all cycle long. But if you can really tap into these elements of inner spring, it can be very nurturing for your entire menstrual cycle. Next up, we have inner summer. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is the shortest phase of your cycle. I feel like I'm talking really fast, but is this helpful? Like, maybe just give me a thumbs up or let me know in the chat box if this is helpful so far, considering we've only been through half of the cycle. Catherine said yes, big thumbs up. And if you have any questions whilst I'm chatting, please pop them in the chat box and I can go through them for you. Now, inner summer, after we've come out of this confidence style time of our inner spring phase, Andrea said, yes, this is so helpful. Yay, so welcome. So as we come into inner summer, we literally are stepping into this birthing stage. And I mentioned earlier, I like to call this the Beyonce phase, where you're like sexy, sassy. I want to put the red lipstick on, even if I'm just going to do the housework because I feel unstoppable. This is the time of your cycle with birthing that you might birth the creative thing that you put together in your inner springtime. Or maybe you're birthing the concept that you had a reflection on whilst you were menstruating in your inner winter time. It's also a time for community. As women specifically, if you're not trying to conceive or you're not trying to start a family, inner summer is a really great phase of your menstrual cycle to get out in the community, to share your energy externally with others. This might be just with your immediate family. It might be with your extended family. Maybe it's in a local community where you like to donate and get together with friends and family, or even colleagues. This is the time where you're going to want to go out, do things and be seen. As your hormones are at the peak for ovulation and are ready for you to be seen, your body's calling for this. So when you notice your next ovulation phase come around, I want you to allow yourself to be outward. I want you to allow yourself to be seen. And maybe that's you do a FaceTime call with a friend instead of, calling them just like to chat on the phone verbally. Maybe you put on a really nice outfit and you wear that at home if you're stuck in isolation. Maybe you plan something for your next ovulation window so that you can go out and see friends or be social, or maybe you have an online dance party. I do all of those things. So that's a little bit of our inner summer. This is also the most beneficial time of your cycle to have raw style foods. Being an Ayurvedic educator as well, I don't encourage eating a lot of cold foods. Where I live in the Southern Hemisphere, it's very popular to have smoothie bowls because I live in a tropical climate where all the tropical foods are grown. So I have access to them literally nearly all year round. So people are always having these cold foods. But for your body, throughout your menstrual cycle, inner summer is the time where you can bless your body with having beautiful cold style foods. Then let's move into our final phase, the inner autumn phase. This is the phase of our cycle where we have the most hormonal shifts and changes. So we have progesterone drops and it comes back up. We have estrogen slowly dropping. We have the luteinizing hormone, the LH hormone also thrown into the mix there. And if you ever look at a menstrual cycle hormone chart, literally it looks like the roller coasters. You could say the roller coasters from Seven Flags. I think that's what it's called in America. Not that I've been there, but I've driven past. Is that literally it looks like this crazy roller coaster. So no wonder inside your body, Six Flags, great. I was close. No wonder inside your body, you feel like that too. Your mind feels like that. Your emotions feel like that. Your food cravings feel like that. So when we come back to recognizing, hang on a second, is this me, as in Jema, craving this food? Or is this just my hormones being a little bit erratic right now? And is it that's what's craving the bag of chips? Or is that what's craving the tub of ice cream? Because in our inner autumn, as we go through all of these shifts and changes before our hormones come down to ground zero and menstruation again, is we want to understand how can we support ourselves right now. And if you can support yourself well through this inner autumn phase, I promise you, and I really should have promised things, but I promise you, this will support a healthy menstruation. Preparation is key for everything. Going on a first date, preparation's key. Where are we going to eat? What are we going to do? What am I going to wear? Will I look okay? Preparation is key for menstruation. And that's what we do throughout our inner autumn phase. So what does this look like? What can you do to support yourself through inner autumn? Number one is go outside. This is the time where your body wants to be nurtured and wants to feel connected. And if you don't have a partner who you can connect with, if you don't have family and friends who you can connect with, or you're feeling a bit static in connection, go outside and connect with nature. That might be just standing at the window looking outside. It might be going on a balcony. It might be going out for a walk, you know, in nature somewhere. It might be laying on the grass or laying in the snow or laying under the sun. Wherever you are in the world, no matter what time of the year it is, there's always an opportunity to get outside in nature in some way, shape or form. And what nature teaches us through inner autumn is that nothing in nature rushes, but everything still gets done. So as you feel a little bit erratic potentially, that's okay. Your body's just doing what it needs to do for today, and connect with your body and love it for that. So on a food sense, this is a really great time of the cycle to have some more carb-based style meals. So what do I recommend? I recommend things like beans, legumes, whole grain style pastas, wild rice, brown rice, red rice style meals. And these have really great protein sources in them. And this can support your body, especially as you're having these maybe potential cravings for sugar, most likely. So having, you know, for me, I'll have, you know, omelets for breakfast, and I'll have porridge. I'll also make myself a big dal meal, or I'll have Mexican feast, or I make some pasta. And that's definitely what I have been acting like in the last week, given that today's day 2 of my cycle. And you'll find that your body is actually utilizing more energy as it's going through these changes, that it will be able to utilize the energy from that food too. On a movement sense, in your inner autumn, this is the time of your cycle where your body wants to just get it done. So this might be, for me, I'm like, I need to go and do, like, I have to go to the gym. I have to lift some weights. I have to go for a run. I have to do extra yoga. I have to like burn off extra energy. Because if you don't and you stay stagnant and stuck, that can then generate into the savage PMS. Some men call this the witch, you know, that comes out, or the T-Rex. I've heard some clients' partners call, you know, the T-Rex comes out. So when you when you think of this, it's important to just stay connected and move your body if you feel stagnant or you have a built up of energy. Catherine said, why did you say cravings for chocolate? So everyone craves different types of things. Particularly, it's funny though, there's different ways you can have chocolate. So I said, or like this, craving, you know, with the inverted brackets, is that what you mean? Just give me a thumbs up so I know. Is that with the chocolate, okay, great. With the chocolate is there's many different types of chocolate. Personally, I feel like if you're having earth-based chocolate, generally a dark chocolate that's 70% or more, and you're doing so in balance where you can have one piece and you don't need to devour the whole block, chocolate eating is fine. When you sit down and you're having chocolate, or you're craving the chocolate, or you're craving the ice cream, like I said, is that often you're looking to fill a void and you're craving something through the food, which isn't actually the food, but the food's filling the place of that particular food. So, yeah, okay, Catherine's got it. Awesome. So when it comes to the cravings, whatever it is that you would insert here, the thing that you can't stop eating, whatever it might be for you, you need to, it's a really great opportunity to look at, why am I craving this food? Where does this craving come from? And is this serving me? Additionally, what I would suggest for everyone in getting to know your cycle, if you don't do this already, is track your cycle. Track your cycle on a written tracker. Don't just use an app. Apps are good, but it's kind of like tap and swipe and forget. A written tracker will help you identify your cycle signs by writing down, I crave chocolate, bad constipation, acne on my face, low energy, haven't been sleeping. You can start to link this up with the different phases of your cycle and maybe see if there's a pattern occurring over a few phases, over a few cycles at a time. Catherine said, love the written charting. Isn't it fantastic? Yes, I do have one that I can suggest for charting. If you've never charted or tracked your cycle before, it's actually kind of fun and it can be very easy. There's a link in my Instagram bio. I'll just pop it in the chat for you. wellsome_Jema, or you can just head directly to my website, which is wellsome.com. And there is a Love Your Cycle guide there that you can download. It's free and it comes with a video series of how to use it. And I also have a free Love Your Cycle Sisterhood Facebook group where we talk about tracking your cycle and all your cycle signs and all those bits and pieces. And inside this cycle tracking guide that you can get if you desire is, I guess, the basic steps on how to get to know your cycle through tracking. And when you start to track your cycle, you literally can identify where challenges are in your cycle. And then once you know that, then you've got something to work with, rather than just being like, oh, I've been really having bad cravings, or I haven't been sleeping much, or God, my period pain is so bad. Tracking it down, you can say, for the last 3 cycles, I've had period pain on the same day of my cycle each cycle. All right, that's a repetitive pattern. What can we do to support that current body's behavior? And then we can come back and work through it. So I've just hit the full time of chatting. But I wanted to ask you all, ladies, is there any questions that you have that you want to pop in the chat box around anything that I've mentioned, or any resources that you feel like you might need? And Catherine, I don't know if you want me to keep rambling or if you're ready for me to move on. Andrea said, if I have a very short bleed, 2 or maybe 3 days max and very light, what should I look into? So the first thing with any bleed, regardless of the length of the bleed, this is a great question, Andrea, is I want you to look at the color of your bleed and how it feels bleeding. Sometimes that's more important than the length of bleed. Personally, I bleed for generally 2 or 3 days as well. But you want to look at, okay, Catherine's going to look at the sacral steamers and she'll be back. Andrea, what I would suggest is looking at the color of your bleed. So what is the color? What is the color of my blood telling me? And then look at, how do I feel whilst you're bleeding? If you feel that it's very light, I would look at warming up your body. I would look at, doing heat packs. You can do a castor oil pack. You can also increase your warm food intake. Without knowing more about you, it's hard to exactly pinpoint. But then I would also suggest identifying in your cycle when you feel stress. And this isn't just cycle stress, like my body's feeling stressed, like because of, this particular reason. This is more so identifying, I've been really stressed at work, or I'm living in a really stressful environment right now. My neighbor is crazy. Or I'm really stressed in my life at the moment. And with COVID-19 happening, there's been a lot of women experiencing changes in their cycle, changes in length of cycle, changes in cycle bleeds, changes in cycle signs. And this is because of the stress globally that we've been experiencing over the last 2 to 3 months, which equates to nearly 3 to 4 cycles for some women, if not 2 to 3 for others. So Andrea, I hope that helps support you in what to look for in understanding between the shorter bleeds and the lighter bleeds. Additionally, I always suggest that if you do have a lighter bleed, taking good quality nutritional products can really support you. If you don't know which ones will be supportive, please come onto Instagram and send me a message. I'd be happy to help. There's a few things you can do to help build up the blood work in your body. And generate that so that you have blood to menstruate. Because if we don't have, I guess, the blood to contribute to the lining of our uterus, which we do menstruate out and release, then we can have stagnance, and then we might not actually be able to have a full menstruation and a full detoxification through menstruating. So the blood and the energy of the blood is really important too. Andrea said, yes, thank you. Oh, thank you for that tip. Yeah, okay. Dark and clotty. Great example. Thank you for sharing. Dark and clotty is warm, 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 warm. So grab the hot water bottle. I would be doing this 2 to 3 days before you start bleeding. I would also be looking at the health of like foods, lots of things you can change in your food. Come join us in the Love Your Cycle Sisterhood. Additionally, for women who would love to learn how to work with me or what it is that I do, I run what's called the Well Women Academy, where it's a private Facebook group with a self-paced course. And every week we have a different event on. from a 5-day challenge to a masterclass to a live class to a Q&A. Every month, every week of the month, we have something going on in there, along with self-paced course. And we're consistently working with each other in the group to help ourselves have a healthier cycle, from the way that we bleed to understanding our emotions through inner autumn, having healthy ovulation. So dark and clotty is warm. You want to do that at least 2 or 3 days before you start menstruating. I'd be looking at reducing any form of processed sugar in your diet. That will definitely help assist you. I would look at breathing. As an all-round wellness Ayurvedic menstrual coach and educator, I don't just look at nutrition. I look at the whole body system, from mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and nutritional. And if you can begin breathing and communicating safety to your body, that I am safe, I am loved, I am supported, your body will actually help feel that you are supporting yourself and feel that you have love for yourself. Whether you're with a partner or not with a partner, if you have love in your life, don't have love in your life, you can love yourself, which is super important. So dark and clotty, that will all help, surprisingly. So I hope that helps Andrea in with the questionnaire and tips around being dark and clotty. Okay, she said, wow, thank you so much. You are so welcome. If there's any other final questions before I pass it back to Catherine when she jumps back in here and joins us, please pop them in the chat box. But if not, I want to say thank you so much for having me. If you'd love to learn more about what I do, just reach out, come say hi. I love hearing from you. And of course, the Well Women podcast has got loads of women information on it if you ever get stuck. All right, Catherine, thank you so much. I'll pass it back to you.
So I am welcoming you back into the main room for our closing ceremony. And the closing ceremony is with LeeLiu. LeeLiu has a cricket speaking to us. So LeeLiu is a ceremonialist. She offers ceremony in Thailand. We've also been in ceremony together in Hong Kong several times, and this is not our first online ceremony either. We've been doing new moons and full moons and spending time together.
So just inviting all of us to take a couple of deep cleansing breaths together, just unifying into the space right now. So taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And maybe some sounds want to come, maybe some movements need to arrive for you to feel a little more free. We've been sitting behind the computer for a bit and just really letting your body feel a little more relaxed in any way that it feels it wants to. And just letting your eyes gently close as your inner eyes begin to expand and grow. As you draw your attention and awareness within, into your own body, into your breath. And just letting the song bring you back into yourself. And this is a song that you may wish to offer yourself anytime you feel you need a refresh, recentering, returning, reclaiming of your power, your presence, your love. I am a woman giving birth to myself. over and over and over again. I am, I am, I am all that I see. I am a woman giving birth to myself over and over and over again. I am, I am, I am all that I see. I am a woman giving birth to myself over and over and over again. I am, I am, I am all that I see. Just letting that continue to deepen your presence into yourself as you breathe deeply into your heart, into your womb. Maybe establishing contact with your heart and your womb space with your physical hands. And just let your breath travel into the body and outwardly into your hands. So feel your heart and your womb expanding and growing with each inhale, and a softening as you exhale. And with this sense of gentle awareness, just noticing where your heart is and the womb is in terms of how it's feeling. It doesn't have to be a long drawn narrative, it can just be one word. Comforted, content, safe, empowered. And as you continue breathing into your heart and your womb, into your hands, it's taking the next few moments to cultivate this sense of gratitude for this body, for this beautiful, perfect, miraculous body. This body that magically works and functions so well in every given moment without you even having to effort too much. And cultivating gratitude to the heart and the soul that is you, that has felt the call to come into a time and a space like this together, to awaken your individual and our collective wisdom. Our wisdom is awakening, our memory is returning. We're returning to reclaim and remember how very precious and beautiful and powerful this body is in all of its phases. And giving great thanks for the lifeblood that travels in your body, for the sacred waters in your body. For the blood, the sweat, the tears, your sacred waters within. blessing these waters. And what we have done together in the last couple of days is we have watered and nourished and empowered the depth of our knowing, the confidence of our bodies with all of this information, with all of this wisdom shares from all of these beautiful women and bodies and hearts. And know that as you sit here individually in your space, what we've done and what we're doing is we're uniting our lifeblood as one. So you showing up here is not only doing incredible healing work for yourself, for your body, for your blood, as you reclaim the power and the beauty of it. We are also doing this work on behalf of our mothers, our grandmothers, the women who will come after us, our generations before and after. So really taking a moment to breathe that immensity into your heart. We are stronger together. Our blood flows in the great stream and the great ocean as one. So taking your hands in Namaste and turning your chin down towards your hands, bowing in reverence and immense gratitude for the great gift of this event, the great gift of this body, the great gift of this life. The great opportunity we have now as women, showing up empowered and educated, to be able to influence and share this wisdom with the women around us. I can imagine a world where periods are loved, where we eagerly anticipate the ideas and inspiration gathered from them, where we expect the break like a weekend retreat on annual vacation, where we talk about them with affection, excitement, and warmth. Where we set up our world to accommodate and support them. I can imagine a world where it feels so good to bleed. Just taking a few deep breaths to celebrate that. How good, how amazing it is, how miraculous it is, how blessed it is for us to bleed. Every cycle, we get to die and rebirth ourselves again and again and again. So I wanted to offer this bleeding song as a closing. May these waters of wisdom continue to flow into the great stream, into the great ocean, as we share this wisdom with everyone, men and women alike. There's a bleeding song when I am offering my blood to the earth. May she receive all of this nourishment as well, as healing, as an offering of love from us. this blood back to the earth, back to the mountains, back to the trees. Oh, this blood back to the earth, back to the waters, back to the sea. 'Cause we are nurturing these cycles of life, and we bleed to release and set ourselves free. 'Cause we are nurturing these cycles of life, and we bleed to release and set ourselves free. Oh, this blood back to the earth, back to the mountains, back to the trees. Oh, this blood back to the earth, back to the waters, back to the sea. 'Cause we are nurturing these cycles of life, and we bleed to release and set ourselves free. 'Cause we are nurturing these cycles of life, and we bleed to release and set ourselves free. Great blessings to you all, dear women, dear sisters. Thank you all. I get like this when I'm praying, so thank you for receiving these waters. I'm also recovering from a concussion and have dengue, so I'm trying to be present with all of you to my best abilities.
Yes, if anyone has anything to say, but I just feel like it's just the most beautiful ending. Thank you.
I want to say thank you, Catherine, Mama Luna. You are amazing. I love you. I cherish you. I honor you. I celebrate you. Thank you for the love that you are. Thank you for, yes, exactly, making this possible. We wouldn't be gathered like this if it wasn't for your efforts and your time and your energy. Putting this and making this happen. So thank you so much from the depths of my heart, and I believe all of our hearts.
We'll see you all again, and we'll stay in touch, and I'll send out. And we have our website. You can contact all these beautiful beings through menstrualawarenessday.com. it was available. So please stay in touch, and we'll do more things, and I'll see you on Saturday at Daniela's workshop. And thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you so much for being a part of Menstrual Awareness Day 2020, and I don't think that I can stop. I mean, I will now. I'll collapse in my bed or maybe in the lake. And wow, it was an incredible 12 hours, what a journey. From the beginning, the maiden, the newness, the ceremony, the learning into our mothering and becoming adults, and then releasing and acknowledging our role as wise one, giving back to the earth, giving back to one another, supporting and caring. Thank you all. Blessings.